So I was at a wedding the day before, but like,
Oh, was it fun?
It was fun, but I woke up on Saturday and my ankle was
Ready,
sore
Sean?
because I got overextended it when I
Okay. Hi, council members and our immense audience. Welcome to our July 15th regular council meeting. And Judy, if you would please do our roll call.
Yes, Hausch.
I'm here.
McQueen. Here. Stokes.
Here.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Krieger.
Here.
Sanford.
Here.
Also present are Finance Director Colleen Harris, Planning and Zoning Administrator Denise Swinger, Chief of Police Brian Carlson, Village Solicitor Chris Connard, and our Village Manager Josue Salmaron.
Okay. So first up, we have a swearing in with Scott Fife. And if you want to come up to the front, and I'm going to come down. And I think what you're reading is right there. And
Okay.
if you don't mind raising your right hand and repeating after me. I solemnly affirm
I solemnly affirm
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
and will obey the laws of the United States
and will obey the laws of the United States
and the state of Ohio,
and the state of Ohio,
that I will in all respects
that I will in all respects
observe the provisions of the Charter
observe the provisions of the Charter
and the ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs,
and the ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs,
and will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of
and will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of
alternate to the Economic Sustainability Commission.
alternate to the Economic Sustainability Commission.
All right, Scott, thanks for your service. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay. And next up, we have announcements. Any announcements?
Well, I'd like
Lisa?
to share something with the community and with the council. This last weekend was the Agraria Arthur Morgan Institute for Community Solutions Center for Regenerative Practice annual meeting. And they gave these beautiful, not awards, but recognitions for entities that helped support Agraria in its founding stages. And so they were thoughtful enough to present one to the Village of Yellow Springs. And because we helped them through our Green Space Fund. And it's just a beautiful piece of art. So I thought everybody would want to see it. That's all. Thank you, Agraria.
Yes, thanks a lot, Lisa. And yeah, it was an amazing meeting. They did this whole snapshot piece to talk about all the different aspects of their work. And it was really great to hear from not only the farmers, but the researchers and the educators. It was really cool. All right. Anything else? All right, well, not surprisingly, I have a few things. So first of all, I wanted to thank the Oddfellows and the Village team and Miami Township Fire and Rescue for a great July 4th celebration. Not only was the parade a ton of fun, but the fireworks were awesome. And we continue to appreciate the facilitation that goes around that. Heard a really good comment about one of our new officers who was not at all out of it, with all the activity when things were breaking down, and was able to respond to a little girl who was talking about wow, what's going on? All this. And, she immediately just pulled aside and said, hey, we're keeping you safe. And it was just nice to see that, our village team is so on the ball. So, also I wanted to mention, there is a new Greene County Parks and Trails website that just went live this morning. It's mobile friendly. So for folks that want to see all the things that we have in terms of parks and trails, I would totally encourage you to do a Google search for Greene County Parks and Trails and see what they've got going on. I should emphasize we do not have a first meeting in August. So August 5th is our annual break. I remember it was Lori Asklund who set this precedent several years ago to make sure that if council members or our village clerk wanted to get a little bit of a summer vacation, they could do that. So our next meeting will be August 19th. And then and Marianne and Lisa were at this event as well. I wanted to mention just a couple shout outs because we had at the Antioch College reunion a town gown discussion. So I was one of the panel members, and it was interesting because at the end of it, one of the moderators asked, "What did you learn today?" to the panelists that you didn't know about. And what I did not say, but I did learn about, was that Florence is doing something interesting around connecting Antioch College students with community members. And it just reminded me that I want to make sure that we always update council and the community on the great outreach things that we are doing. But my understanding is that Florence's initiative is to make sure that Antioch students are connected with local families so that they feel more a part of the community. And it was really great to hear that. It also reminded me, I saw Rose Pelzel today, and I just wanted to say I loved seeing her tips to the community about utilities. And it reminds me of, what we're trying to do with Corkle, which I'll probably mention when we get to the minutes, because it's 2 C's, not a K. And the fact that every member of our village staff can make a huge difference in the community. And I'll mention something more about that later. And we already talked about Agraria. Last thing I wanted to highlight, because I talked about it at our retreat on Friday, is what I heard on NPR about all the cyber attacks aimed at municipalities. There have been 176 this year, and one of the main states that they highlighted was Ohio. And so I know this is on Josue's radar. We've got a great IT team, and so one of the things that I asked for in an upcoming meeting is just some highlights about how we're protecting our data and making sure that we don't get held for ransom like some of the other communities that we've heard about. So, any other announcements?
Brian, I'd just like
Yes.
to jump in on the cybersecurity.
Jump in.
We have trained everyone on the team around phishing and how to protect our systems from ransomware and other cyber attacks.
Great.
I also want to reassure everyone on the security protocols that we have in place to protect our data. We have backups and they're done on an hourly basis, so should our data systems become compromised, we would just delete everything that we have on that's been compromised and reboot from backups that we have, so our exposure is minimal.
Nice. And what's that statement that they always say about how, we won't negotiate with terrorists or whatever? Yes, that is our philosophy. All right,
And that hasn't worked for some people. They pay the ransom and they don't get their data back.
yeah. Well, that's the other thing I learned is that, it doesn't even make sense to pay them anyway, so, yeah.
It can be very risky.
I'm glad we're on top of that, so thanks a lot. Okay, so we have a consent agenda, and I guess I'm gonna pull the minutes off from the last regular session to correct one thing. But we do have the minutes from the special session retreat. Can I get a motion to approve?
I move.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. So, the only thing I noticed on the regular session minutes from our last meeting was I just wanted to make sure to correct the acronym CORCL, which again means the heart of the seed. And it's really important, I think, for our future. We're going to hear a lot more about it. But I just wanted to remind everyone what that acronym stands for. These are our village team values that we are all thinking about to make sure that we operate as an organization that provides the maximum service to our community. And so the first C is collaborative. The O is to be open. The R is resolution-oriented. The second C is constructive. L is locally minded, and E is empathetic. And you'll soon be seeing a poster in the Bryan Center to highlight that, because we want to remind ourselves of the values that we want to achieve, because we think these are the things that our citizens hope that we are delivering when we do serve. So with that, I'll make a motion to amend the minutes with Corkle with the C. And can I get a
Yeah, I
motion?
move that we amend the minutes as Brian has stated.
All right. Second?
Second?
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. Review the agenda. Anything that we want to change, add? There's one thing I would like to do, which is with legislation. I'd like to do ordinance 2019-17 and then 23, 24, 25, since those are all about, the quorum piece for PC and BZA, so that we can then move into the discussion around the transient guest lodging. Okay. Anything else? All right, Mary Ann, petitions and communications.
Yes. Brian, you submitted a photograph with an explanation from the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission with a photograph of you, our former village manager, and Johnny Burns standing at one of our corners showing the ADA ramps, and I believe they are all in now, is that right?
I think that's true.
Project is all complete.
Yeah.
Then we had a number of letters of people from Yellow Springs wanting us to either increase the solar cap or allow more residential solar. So those people were Hap Kaywood, Donna Howler, Ruth Huff, Jessica Holohan, Alice and David Kennedy, Sean Craig, and Volker Vaughn. Al Schluter wrote a letter discussing his concern about the increasingly and dramatic increase in deer in the community, and noted, aside from the gardens that the deer rampage, other ways that the deer are potentially threatening the safety in Yellow Springs. And I thought that demanded some follow-up. So I just talked to Josue just before the meeting, and Josue, I'm not sure how we want to address it, but I think it bears looking into.
Yes, absolutely, and we'll reach out to the partners, the Glen and other relevant groups to see what's the best approach to take on
I understand
this.
that Five Rivers Metro Park at one time did agree to have some, well, as Al suggests, bow hunting over
Mhm.
a period of time when people were not allowed in there
Right.
to cull some of the deer.
Mhm.
Thanks.
I'll provide an update in next meeting
Okay.
as to what's
Thank-
possible.
Thank you.
And just, and he did make those recommendations on properties that, people would not normally
Right, not on our
be.
streets.
Yes.
So not down Dane.
And I'll say one more thing. There are some animals that are able to sort of self-regulate their population and others that aren't. And deer are one of those that are not. So the point Al was making is they're eating things that they normally wouldn't. Like they ate flowers from my ghost pepper plants.
Ooh,
Wow.
I thought I'd be safe. That means that they're overpopulated, and then during the winter, a lot of them will die off from starvation. So maybe having a little human intervention would
okay.
make it a little more humane. That's it for the
Okay.
communications.
All right, thank you, Mary Ann. So we're going to move right into legislation, and first up is ordinance 2019-17. Judy, we can do that by title only.
All right, this is repealing Section 1220.01, appointment of alternate members of the codified ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, and enacting new Section 1220.01, appointment of alternate members.
Can I get a motion, please?
I move.
Second.
Okay. So Denise, maybe you can just kind of talk about
So-
these four pieces,
Yeah.
these four ordinances and what we're trying to do?
Okay, this particular one, appointment of alternate members, is one that has been in the planning code. It isn't really relevant anymore because of the fact that we can have recorded copies of, you can review minutes, you can review the tape from Channel 5, and we felt that having alternates not be able to participate, if you're carrying over something from the meeting before, it makes it pretty useless. So that's why we wanted to change it, because the alternates are usually not at the previous meeting, so.
Great. And then, do you want to just mention the other three ordinances?
Sure.
What those
The-
are?
The other three are specific to a quorum, being a majority of the members present make the quorum. The old zoning code says it's the total members of the majority of, so you'd have to have three, whereas the charter says a quorum is defined as the majority of the members that are present. So if you had three, then it'd be, and if it was a 2-to-1, the motion would still pass. And we just, basically all this was to just put the zoning code in line with what's already in the existing charter.
Great. Okay. So this is a second reading, so I'm going to open the public hearing. Any questions or comments from council? Questions or comments from citizens? All right, so not directly related, but I do want to get on the record that we only have one planning commission alternate right now. And based on some of the activity with planning commission currently, I think it's really important that we have two alternates. We do have two alternates for BZA. So I'd like to make sure that we actively, fill that other alternate seats. Okay?
idea.
So with that, Judy, if you could call the roll?
Yes, McQueen,
Yes.
Sanford,
Yes.
Stokes,
Yes.
Krieger,
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes. All right. Okay, so next up is ordinance 2019-23. We already have the background on that. So can I get a motion, please?
I move.
Well, I do need to read it in by.
Oh, sorry, read title only, thank you.
Yep. This is repealing Section 1276.02, Planning Commission Powers and Duties of the Codified Ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, and enacting new Section 1276.02, Planning Commission Powers and Duties.
All right, I'll take that motion.
All right.
And a second?
Second.
Okay. Again, a second reading, so I'll open the public hearing. Any comments from council or citizens? Okay, if not, I'm going to close the public hearing, and Judy, if you could do the roll?
Yes, Krieger,
Yes.
McQueen,
Yes.
Sanford,
Yes.
Stokes,
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes. All right, 2019-24, title only again?
This is repealing Section 1278.01, Appointment, Meetings, and Quorum of the Codified Ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, and enacting new Section 1278.01, Appointment, Meetings, and Quorum.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right. Again, we've got a second reading, so I'll open the public hearing. Questions or comments from council or citizens? All right, if not, I'll close the public hearing, and Judy, if you can do the roll.
Yes, Stokes,
Yes.
Sanford,
Yes.
McQueen,
Yes.
Krieger,
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes. Okay, and the final one in this suite, 2019-25. Judy, you can do that again by title only.
All right, this is repealing Section 1278.06, Decisions of the Board of the Codified Ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, and enacting new Section 1278.06, Decisions of the Board.
Okay, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Second reading, so again, I'll open the public hearing. Questions or comments from citizens or council? All right, then we'll close the public hearing, and Judy, one more roll call.
All right, Krieger,
Yes.
McQueen,
Yes.
Stokes,
Yes.
Sanford,
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes. Okay. So next up, we have a variety of other legislation. Denise, let's go ahead and do an overview, and then we'll get into the ordinances.
Sure. You know, Airbnb is a relatively new concept. It didn't even exist before 2008. Back in 2016, Planning Commission had wanted to add more restrictions on what was then called short-term rentals. And when I contacted other people that do planning and zoning in the region, it wasn't even on their radar yet. So we were kind of a little bit ahead of the game on that. And so when this effective legislation to tax what became transit guest lodging in 18 happened, we changed the zoning from a conditional use to a permitted use. And so now all it takes for a person to register a transit guest lodging establishment is to fill out an application and pay a permit fee. So there's really not any mechanism for ensuring things like safety, parking, other kinds of questions that Planning Commission would like to be able to vet with that person who's considering it. Earlier this year, council approved having the manager's housing advisory board have a meeting, a community meeting with establishment owners who were invited and the community at large. This was run by Kaneda Sanford and A.J. Williams, both of the Housing Advisory Board. And what they explained was that council was considering legislative changes that would govern how we deal with transit guest lodging establishments, specifically grandfathering in existing ones that were permitted, but banning future transit guest lodging establishments if the owner does not live on the property. So when that was explained by Kaneda and AJ, at this meeting, some of the concerns that were brought forward, and I don't remember exactly how many people were there, maybe 15, 20, something. Some of the concerns were that the number of applications that we received and do not necessarily translate into the number of houses that we would be losing, because those houses would probably not be available for sale on the active market, so you kind of can't compare that. Also, the village is no longer affordable due to high taxes and utility costs. Short-term renting is more economical than long-term renting, specifically risk of evictions, landlord paying utility bills, destruction of property. And 4, we are a tourist town, provide a service to those visitors in the village as a whole. So Planning Commission then took that information and over the course of April, May, and June, discussed the topic. They explored making it a conditional use and what specific requirements should be added. They also discussed requiring that it be owner-occupied, also limiting the number of transient guest lodging operations within certain districts, restricting the number of days within a calendar year, and only allowing permanent residents to be transit guest lodging operators. At one of the meetings, the solicitor advised against only allowing permanent residents on constitutional grounds. Restricting the number of days within a calendar year would be not easily monitored, but it's not totally impossible if you were having it done through Airbnb. Placing a cap on the number of transit guest lodgings in zoning districts was considered, and it was explored, but it wasn't certain how many's too many. I mean, people were like, well, they asked for a map. I supplied a map at the next meeting, and it looked like there was a lot of concentration in certain areas, but that was also an area where it was more dense, densely populated with housing. So then they were saying, well, how many would you have in each district? And they really couldn't come to a conclusion on that either. So one area that was pretty unpopular with the establishment owners was the restriction of owner-occupied. Staff wasn't sure how to regulate it and what exactly we mean by that. I think that needs to be explored a little bit more, because is it owner occupied if they are not living there part of the year? Is it owner occupied if it's an owner of an apartment building that happens to live in one of the apartments and then chooses to rent out other apartments? There's just some more dialogue on that. And I know that Lisa especially had expressed, let's get this going, let's put something rather than having nothing. So because of this, it kind of just came down to the Planning Commission decided to tighten up the requirements for the conditional use process, which is pretty much, it will be evaluated case by case. And there's safety concerns in there, there's parking concerns. You may have noticed that we require that the fire department has to take a look at that. There'll be an evaluation of it based on where it's at in a neighborhood, the impact, because all of the neighbors in a conditional use process, which is a lengthy process, it requires that the person pay a $100 fee that they won't get back if it's denied. It goes into the newspaper, a sign's put up in the yard, all the neighbors around the property get notification of the meeting. So that in and of itself will probably deter some people. But for those that it doesn't, those neighbors that might have an issue with it can come and express their concerns, and that would definitely weigh in and be a factor in a decision if Planning Commission decides to deny it. So at the last time I sent you something, I think it was June 19th or something, I kind of gave you a little synopsis of how many establishments we have that would be located in single-family or two-family or within individual apartments. And it's been changed. As of July 11th, there are now 40. Out of those 40 that are operating in homes or apartments, 33 of those are owner-occupied. And this includes accessory dwelling units or two families where the owner resides in another dwelling on the property. Out of the 40, 2 are owned by residents that live in Yellow Springs but don't live on this property. 1 is owned by a township resident, and then there are 4 that are owned by non-residents. So what Planning Commission has recommended is that council passes legislation to make transient guest lodging a conditional use, and then they want to look at it again in about 9 months to see if there's any upswing where it looks like it's becoming more of an issue, and then go back and just modify and maybe add the owner-occupied if they do some more research on that. But for now, we wanted to get something on there.
Okay.
That's kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Chris?
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right.
Just for the record, I think it should, the minutes should reflect that Mary Ann recused herself from the discussion.
Yep. All right. Okay, thanks, Denise. And I feel like we need to discuss conditional and owner-occupied before we actually introduce any legislation, because it's going to have an impact on how we move forward. So I'll open with a few things. So it's interesting that I guess since your last report, we went from 36 to 40, I guess within a month-ish. And by my count, that is about 20% that are not owner-occupied. So I guess a couple things that I think are important in framing this discussion. One of them is something that's come up throughout this, which is what's the problem we're trying to solve? I honestly feel that that's been articulated pretty clearly, and I watched the Planning Commission meeting, and you know, Chris, I think you and others articulated that, which is that, number one, we're thinking about our housing issues and affordable housing and, you know, the issue around taking rentals off the market. So that's one piece. And I think the other concern that we've had is that, as I put it, the fat cat that comes into town, sweeps through and buys up a bunch of properties and Airbnbs them out, or, you know, VOIBs or whatever, you know, all the different ones. And I guess one of the things I want to emphasize is I do not think it's wrong for council to be proactive in this regard. So while I do agree with feedback I've gotten that we don't have a big issue right now, based on what I saw with solar, and once everybody like decided, oh, 1% cap, we got this bum rush, and suddenly we're like exceeding our cap. So I don't think it's impossible that something could happen, and so that's why I don't think it's illegitimate for us to be thinking about that. So then I think the other piece is, from everything I've processed, there are a couple things that I think we need to think about. One is whether or not conditional makes sense or not, all right? And, you know, we have heard concerns around, you know, whether conditional use puts a certain impediment that might limit activity and whether that's appropriate or not. And then the second thing is whether the owner-occupied piece is, you know, just kind of a way to make a bright line that, you know, could be a clear policy. And I know from the Planning Commission discussion that many other communities have done that. And so, you know, I think part of what we've got to look at is what kind of process issues we want to think about. I also want to weigh in on, I think caps are wrong. And I, you know, particularly think this because part of what we're also trying to do is allow people to stay in town. And so if, you know, renting out a room in their house helps them do that, that makes a lot of sense to me. So caps, I think that's the wrong path to go on. And, I mean, I think that's enough for, I guess, some of the observations I've made, but I wanted to just kind of help us frame this a little bit. Because at the end of the day, we have to make a decision to, you know, move forward with conditional. And I appreciate the, you know, evaluation behind, like, let's see how that works. Or potentially, do we start over? And do we evaluate another approach? So, so that's some of my thoughts. Other thoughts from council members?
Well, I think just overall, I think making the change to conditional, I think is a positive move in terms of just having some modicum of accountability, which is probably a better word than control. I don't really, I mean, I can, $100 in terms of a fee, I think is average. So I don't think the fee itself is much of an impediment, and if it is the right place, whatever that means in terms of, you know, the fit for the neighborhood and the structure itself, you know, all of the requirements that might be levied, you know, against in the application. Again, if folks are doing things right and making things safe, I don't think those things would be an impediment. Certainly, I can appreciate Planning Commission not wanting to go as far as putting the caps on, but I think it's important that we do something, and I think going with conditional use, but not being as strict as some of the other possible changes, I think is sort of a good compromise or a good starting place. If Planning Commission is looking or expecting to revisit this thing down the road and just see. I mean, it's almost no harm, no foul. I mean, how bad can it be? So I think going conditional is the right way. And in that, the plan is to look at these other things down the road, depending on what happens over the next 9 months. You know, I would withhold further comment depending on what actually happens. But I would certainly be in favor of making the transit guest lodging conditional use.
Okay. Kenetta?
Yeah, so I looked back into what the city of Columbus does for their transient guest lodging. And one of the differences that they had was that they charged more for a non-primary residence than if it is someone's primary residence, so that could be a possibility. And in that, I kind of see an accessory dwelling unit, or if it's a room, or let's say you're in a duplex and it's the other side, I see that as primary residence, as long as they're on that property. So
In the fee structure, you mean, as far as an application fee? Okay.
yeah, they actually charge an annual fee, and the annual fee for the non-primary residence is
That's
doubled.
interesting.
So I think that there are many different ways to do this, but I do agree that the conditional use is a good next step.
Okay. Lisa, any?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that at minimum, I agree with the conditional use. I mean, as I was reading it, I thought, you know, it also is quite subjective, really, the way the conditional use decision is made. You could argue that, you know, having more clear-cut rules, as you say, you know, the line might make it easier for the planning commission, make their time more efficient, but I think at minimum, it should be that. I also noticed in the body of the report, there was a comment that the majority of our transient guest lodging properties are already owner occupied. And that really popped out at me, because I thought, well, if the majority are already owner occupied, to make that a rule going forward wouldn't be that much of a switch from our baseline. So if we are going to put more clarity on the rules, maybe sooner rather than later. But I really do like that idea, Kaneda, about having differences in the fee schedule. That's a really great idea. Thank you.
Okay. So before we move into the legislation, also, if we have any comments from citizens, Megan?
Megan Bachman, Yellow Springs News. I just have 2 questions. One is, can you give me an estimate about like how much time something might take, and it might be a range to have this? And then the second question would be, like, what are the criteria that Planning Commission is going to be using, and would they be able to deny actually an application?
You mean how long it takes to go through a conditional process, yeah? Okay, so, yeah, if they fill out the application and they get it to me within 21 days usually, and within a month, then we can schedule it and have time to get in the paper. It has to have 10 days' notice in the paper. And we have to be able to get the letters out. As far as the restrictions that we put in there previous to what was added, it was just simply an emergency contact number and really vague on the location. But now we're requiring that the Planning Commission will consider the proposed location relative to its proximity to other such uses in the vicinity in order to avoid an undue concentration that could have a negative effect on the surrounding neighborhood. So they're going to evaluate that. Obviously, if there's neighbors that might come forward too, they're going to weigh in on that. That would be a deciding factor. They will ensure that there's parking. They're going to require that there's an inspection by the Miami Township Fire and Rescue for the installation of smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, and that those would have to get checked annually. If the applicant is not the property owner, then a letter from the property owner allowing this as a transit guest lodging would be required. And then the other standards that came out of accessory dwelling units, that they have to share public utilities if it's in an accessory dwelling. But there's also specific standards within the conditional use process, which I don't have in front of me, but it evaluates other things, and I could get that to you later, if you like.
And right now, owner occupied is not being proposed as one of the criteria for the conditional use, right?
Right, come back with a report in 9 months to Planning Commission, and if we think we need to then put owner occupied in place, we can make an amendment to the existing conditional use.
And is there an appeal process related to conditional use?
Yes, there is.
So how does that work?
Well, the appeal process it goes to council, and it is based on looking at all the documentation that was involved in the case. But the council's decision is made based on a procedural inadequacy. So if the applicant feels that there was a piece of, a strong part of their rationale that was excluded by the staff in the report, and so maybe Planning Commission didn't have all the information that they needed, or if it was something like it wasn't noticed properly, things like that.
Okay.
But it's really based on procedural inadequacy that you make your decision on.
Gotcha. Okay. Chris, did you want to?
Speak a couple things.
Yep.
I think sometimes it's important that we kind of revisit the words that we're using to make sure that everybody fully appreciates what they are. And I think conditional use is one of those words that I think everybody knows what it means, but it does have a specific context within zoning law. So a conditional uses are allowed under the zoning code, but they're uses that may have a significant impact and thus require an administrative hearing for approval. While the issue of the conditional use is not a matter of right in the same sense that a permitted use is, the authorization for a conditional use cannot be arbitrarily denied, ergo the administrative hearing process. But I think that the critical part is, and Lisa, I don't mean to pick on the word that you use, but you use subjective. It's actually not a subjective process because objective criteria are applied. However, the Planning Commission still has the discretion to approve or deny conditional use permits based upon evaluation of unique circumstances in the petition. So the code says that we have these standards, and we look at each one of these situations on a case-by-case basis. The application of those criteria are intended to be an objective application of the facts of that unique circumstance. Ergo, that's why I think sometimes it has this feel of being subjective. Well, in that sense, yes, it's subjective to that application, but the criteria are meant to be applied in a uniform way, or said a different way, not in an arbitrary or unreasonable manner. So one of the things that I would say as your solicitor is that we've been talking about this since 2015. There's been an evolution of the law. Obviously, many communities have come up with different and unique ways to handle it. I've included some of those ways in my solicitor's report. I presented, I think, Denise and Planning Commission with a PowerPoint from a presentation I did last December. I think that it is worthwhile to continue the discussion on the owner-occupied limitation. However, that legal definition is going to be a very technical one. And I think that as a member of the staff that we need to go back and look at that, because we don't have a functional definition that I would think would work in the context of what I'm hearing council talk about. And I think that we ought to go back and look at that. Again, what may be the definition of owner-occupied somewhere may not be exactly what we're talking about here, and I'll give you an example. A tenant has a possessory right to have full control over their premises. In many leases, landlords might allow or permit a tenant to lease a room. Would we consider that a owner-occupied in that sense because a tenant is there? It's an affordable housing component. I don't know what the answer to that question is. I simply point that out because those were issues that were raised back in 2015 as part of that discussion on one of the factors that was put out there on why maybe we didn't make it a conditional use at that time and everything was permitted. So it's a conversation that needs to get some more, pardon the pun, meat on the bones, in my opinion.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Karen?
Karen Wintrow. I think conditional use is at a minimum. It's where we started, and that's where we should have stayed with transient guest lodging. People are, it's a business enterprise, it's a revenue generating enterprise for people, and they're bringing people into their home, and I think at a minimum, those are requirements that they should be required to meet, and the $100 investment is very minimal. So I think at a minimum that the conditional use is fine. The owner occupied, I am not particularly supportive of that because of some of the reasons that Chris mentioned. We really don't have that big investor swooping in. All of the non-owner occupied properties right now, if they're not owned by somebody local that is using them as an investment property, they are homes that are owned by people who are either here part-time or they plan on moving to Yellow Springs at some time, and they come here periodically. So I don't know of any Airbnbs right now that are owned by somebody from out of town that doesn't use them themselves, at least at some point. So, the one thing I'm wondering, and I think the addition of the emergency contact, and maybe there are some of those questions and criteria within the conditional use that could help to pin down a little bit more to keep that big investor from coming in, just requiring local accountability. And I mean, the emergency contact is one way. I don't know if there are other ways to try to require local accountability, but that would be one way to maybe put some controls on it. But I support the direction council's going.
Thanks, Karen. Any other questions or comments from citizens? Dave?
Well, David Turner, as a bum that came to hear about solar, I thought I'd throw out some thoughts about this. Not in any particular order. Too bad if it's tough for the applicant. I'm not sympathetic. Not to make it too bad, but sorry. If you want to come make some money, you got to put some money in. I would urge keeping it simple because I think it's better that way, whatever that means. Even though this sounds complicated, err on the side of limiting it as much as possible. We had one near us, a couple houses away. People were coming and going. We didn't know who they were. Traffic was tricky, partly because of the layout of our little driveways. And I'd like to know the neighbors. It was disconcerting to have that. And I think it would be good to place a high value on the neighbor concerns for those kinds of reasons. I'm not sure I understand it. It sounds like there's a concern about affordability. When I look at the rentals, the houses for rent, they're more than I've ever paid for a mortgage by far, so I don't see how it's an affordability issue. If you're paying a whole lot of money at $100 a day, that's $3,000 a month, so it doesn't seem affordable to me. I might be missing something on that. The sale of houses hasn't been a problem in the past, and I don't think it's likely to be one in the future. The same house that had been an Airbnb just sold in 2 days next to us this weekend, and the realtor from out of town was asking me, because I provide the realtors and the owners with our homeowners association covenants and restrictions and whatnot, and sort of welcome them to the neighborhood. You owe $115 a year dues, by the way, kind of a thing. She was asking about whether, I said, and Airbnbs are not, we voted in our group to not allow Airbnbs, and she asked about that because other people might want to buy houses to do that. So that's my one data point showing that people are from outside thinking about that. This is somebody from Oakwood, and since we all hate Oakwood, then figured that would add extra points to that. And lastly, I think, second to lastly, I think keeping owner-occupied and deciding to move it later might be easier because if for another reason, new processes to make money can sweep in quickly and change things quickly. And if we're controlling it ahead of time instead of trying to come in later and say, wait a minute, we want to stop this, it might also be easier.
All right. Thanks, David. Any other questions or comments from citizens? Okay, anything else from council? I mean, I think we've had enough discussion to start looking at the legislation. And I'm going to flag the one piece that would allow us to make some adjustments. So, all right, sounds like we're ready to move. So, Judy, if you can read in by title only, 2019-18.
Yes, this is repealing Section 1246.2 Schedule of Uses of the Codified Ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, and enacting new Section 1246.02 Schedule of Uses.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right, Denise, you want to
Yeah,
just kind
it's
of let
just
us know what
simply,
each one?
it's simply adding, it's changing it from permitted to conditional and the schedule uses.
Okay. Questions or comments? All right, so I'm going to open the public hearing. Any questions or comments from citizens? Okay, if not, I'm going to close the public hearing. And Judy, if you could do the roll call?
Yes, Krieger.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Sanford.
Yes.
Tausch.
Yes. Okay. Next, we have ordinance 2019-19, and we can do that by title only as well.
Okay, this is repealing section 1248.02 Schedule of Uses of the codified ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, and enacting new section 1248.02 Schedule of Uses.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right. Denise?
Again, changing from permitted to conditional in residential districts.
Okay. I'll open the public hearing. Any questions or comments? All right, if not, I'll close the public hearing, and Judy, roll call?
Stokes.
Yes.
Sanford.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Tausch.
Yes. Okay, next up, we have 2019-20, and we can do that by title only.
This is repealing section 1250.02 Schedule of Uses of the codified ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, and enacting new section 1250.02 Schedule of Uses.
Can I get a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Okay. Again, I'll open the public hearing. Questions or comments? Denise, just tell us what this one is.
It's same thing, just a different district.
Okay, all right. Close the public hearing, and we'll do the roll call.
Sanford.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Tausch.
Yes. Okay, and then we've got 2019-21. Again, we can do that by title only.
This is repealing section 1258.01 District Uses of the codified ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, and enacting new section 1258.01 District Uses.
Can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right, Denise?
Again, changing it to conditional. I just want to make a note that the only places that it's, districts it's not allowed in is conservation and industrial. So that's why you're seeing these education and business.
All right, thank you. I'll open the public hearing. Questions or comments? Okay, I'll close the public hearing, and we'll do the roll call.
Krieger.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Sanford.
Yes.
Tausch.
Yes. Okay, next up, we have 2019-22. I think it's okay to do that by title only as well.
Okay, this is repealing section 1262.08 Specific Requirements of the codified ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, and enacting new section 1262.08 Specific Requirements.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right, Denise?
Okay, so these are the requirements that Planning Commission came up with that are going to be asked, along with the standards, additional specific requirements for the conditional use.
Do you want to just read the titles of those? or-
Yeah, the permit process, which includes contact information for the owner, and if not the owner being in the town, it would be the property manager who can be contacted in case of emergencies or any other concerns. B, the location, considering the location relative to such uses that could have a negative effect on the surrounding community, neighborhood specifically. Maximum occupancy, the maximum number of tenants that the health department will require or will allow, and then in accessory dwelling units, no more than 2 adults, which is in our code. Utilities, have to share utilities with the principal dwelling unit. They'll not be separately metered if it's a second dwelling, specific to accessory dwelling units. Parking, there has to be at least one off-street parking space on the lot for the transit guest lodging unit, in addition to what the requirement for the principal dwelling unit, which right now is 2, so a total of 3 off-street. No new access points or driveways are going to be created or installed for access to this transit guest lodging unit. The applications are not transferable, so a change in the ownership of the property, or if the applicant was submitted under a tenant's name, it's null and void once they move out. If the applicant is not the property owner, then a letter from the property owner agreeing to the use of their dwelling for transit guest lodgings also required with the application, and then, of course, the inspection process by Miami Township.
Okay. Which is a nice addition, by the way, as far as that safety goes. So I'm going to open the public hearing, and again, I'll comment here that this would be the point where if council felt that any other criteria should be considered, this is, I mean, our current opportunity to make a suggestion for an amendment. And I think, you know, what we've heard is that the recommendation from Planning Commission, and I think Denise, is to, let's see what happens over the next 9 months. So, any thoughts about that?
I don't have anything I want to add. Like I said earlier, I think we make these changes, see how it goes. Of course, see how it goes is sort of nebulous. So I wondered if there would just be some thought put into what Planning Commission might be looking for. If it's every item here, every requirement, if it's simply just saying, looking for variation, you know, from, or away from each of those items, that's understandable. But I do wonder, item H, was there a lot of discussion about whether a tenant could lease out their, or sublet their apartment?
That came up as a result of someone who submitted an application and received the permit under the permitted use process, and then I got a contact from the realtor. Now, I said, don't you have something in your lease agreement for subletting, which they did, but they were just said, you know, that might be something to think about, is that they would have to get, because this particular realtor with the home occupation permit process, I did require that the home occupation permit, they had to get something from the owner, which was the realty company. But that was spelled out under, because home occupations are a conditional use. But in the permitted, I didn't. There's no requirements, really. It's just completing the application and paying the money.
So I think this is, that kind of thing is certainly just more evidence that going to conditional use is certainly the right thing to do. I've said before, we're a small village, but we're starting to have big city problems. You know, this is the kind of thing that happens in big cities. I think I will second or third, you know, Kanetta's suggestion, you know, that other communities have done this thing before, and maybe looking at the things that they've done, having those varied fee schedules, depending on the circumstances, might be something worth looking into.
Lisa, did you?
Yeah, I just want to underscore, I really liked the way Mr. Turner made that comment about putting a high value on neighbor concerns. I think that's extremely important in terms of the, you know, the energy in our communities. But on the other hand, I can imagine if it were I and I wanted to do something and then my neighbors said, oh, you can't do that, and then I ended up not being able to do that, that might also give me some hard feelings as well. So for me, I think that maybe is the most challenging thing to navigate, because I think that is where it gets a little bit subjective, is balancing out the voices in favor or against something that an individual community member wants to do.
And I know the Planning Commission talked about that for a bit, because we kind of got into the whole discussion of conditional. Is it like a permitted with conditions, or is it conditional in that can't you deny based on what a neighbor may say? So I think they're keen to that, but I think that in the case of this, they're gonna really listen to that.
Thank you.
Okay. Something else, Kevin?
Yeah, and I will echo Chris's comments about, you know, how unsubjective subjective really is. You know, but Littlewood, where David lives, I mean, that's like a perfect example of when you know the area, and I don't know how many neighborhoods have homeowner associations. You know, that's where it's going to be different. Some of these considerations are going to be applied differently or more stringently, you know, in an area like that. And so, I think, again, we're heading down the right path, and as long as the objective rules are applied subjectively as needed, given the circumstances, I think, again, we're heading in the right direction.
Okay. Any questions or comments from citizens? Okay. Canetta, you're good? Okay, so I guess I'll just, sort of related to this, I want to make sure that council gets a monthly update about activity around transient guest lodging. So.
Yeah, you get a quarterly, you get a monthly.
Right.
It'll show on there.
But I want to make sure that we're flagging that in
Flagging it.
particular. So, you know, just so that we can track this and I guess be part of the monitoring piece. You know, that's partly our obligation. Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing. And with that, roll call. Judy?
Yes, Krieger.
Yes.
Sanford.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes. Okay. Is that everything for you, Denise?
I think I have do I need to comment on the resolution for the CPI recommendation?
Yeah, I
Is
guess that would be good for you to stick around. I just wanted to mention, because it's not really on the agenda, but you mentioned in your report some objections from folks about the overgrowth of vegetation in the right-of-way, and that you were getting some pushback about that, and I wondered if you could just elaborate on that. Oh, yeah,
I
Mary
mentioned
Ann
in
can come, yeah, we should get Mary Ann back in.
Okay, so in which report? Oh, in my
Yes.
quarterly.
We talked about resistance to vegetation in the right-of-way.
Yeah. Well,
Welcome back.
staff is evaluating that process because we have a notification process that basically is send a letter, you've got 5 days, if you don't take care of it, then we're going to contact a company to do it, and then we are gonna pay that company, and we are gonna then bill you. If you don't pay, then we're gonna assess it to your, okay. But, you know, there are cases where there's properties that are not, you can't mow. You can't even do that. So, if people aren't cooperative, we're trying to look at, well, what's the next step beyond that? Is there a process for fining them? So that's why has been looking into it.
So we're facing this challenge that if we follow our ordinance, we would send someone to take care of the problem and we'll send them the bill. Well, some folks, whether they're knowingly doing it, they're creating obstacles on their properties that would not allow us to bring a crew in to mow. So we're exploring what other options we have. Could we just continue to find them and have the fees rack up until the issue is solved? Now, we've tried all the soft touches there are to be had. Phone calls, we've had team members make a personal appeal, go out to and say, hey, you know what, we need to take care of this issue. And you know, we haven't had much success. So we want to look at all options that are available to us to enforce code, because it really comes down to a code enforcement issue. We have ordinance that need to be enforced, and we need to have all the vehicles and all the options available to enforce them.
Okay. So if it makes sense to report on that in August, you know, if you think there's something to update on us on.
Yes, and we're exploring that because we will be reporting back to council what may be available to us within the current guidelines and rules and regulations, and if we need council to adopt a new ordinance for that, then we will make that petition.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Can I ask a question, just for clarification? Are all code enforcement issues in response to complaints, or are we?
Most
Yes.
are, yeah. We're not driving out looking for people to ding on things. It's all complaint driven. If we get a complaint that's substantiated, then we need to do our jobs and follow up.
Except, I mean, I hope we're still doing the door hangers where, because, you know, a big concern that came up last year was when people are letting bushes cover half the sidewalk or other vegetation.
Oh, absolutely. There
so-
are things that are obvious such as that, yes.
Yeah.
And the complaints can also come from within.
Yep.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
Good, yeah. All right, thanks Denise. All right. Okay, so next up we have 2019-26. And Judy, we can do that by title only.
Okay, this is granting a utility easement to Vectren Energy Delivery of Ohio Incorporated and declaring an emergency.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right. Josue, you gonna talk about this one, or?
This is the Vectren, same one. Yes, we discussed this one about providing the easement for Vectren for the work that they're doing in town. So this is, we recommend this. It's, we needed to be able to provide gas service delivery to those residents.
Okay. And my understanding from our last meeting is that that's on the edge of our property, that it's not gonna affect any of the development that we wanna do at Dayton Railroad Street. right?
Correct, correct.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna open the public hearing since this is the second reading. Any questions or comments from citizens or council? Okay.
I just want to confirm that it's not also not going to affect any current business or resident right there in that.
No, the parties that it could affect, they've already been engaged in conversations about where this easement will go.
Great.
And they're in support.
Thank you.
Mhm. They've also weighed in on where they want the connection.
Where they want it, yeah.
Correct.
Thank you.
Good, okay. Anything else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing, and Judy, roll call?
Yes, Stokes,
Yes.
McQueen,
Yes.
Sanford,
Yes.
Krieger,
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes. Okay. Next up, we have 2019-27, and I think we can do that one by title only as well.
All right, this is authorizing and directing the submission to a vote of the electors of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, a proposal to amend certain provisions of the Charter of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, to be voted upon at the next regular municipal election on November 5th, 2019, and declaring an emergency.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right. Judy, why don't you tell us what this resolution is about?
Well, certainly, you brought forth one particular issue, which was the Vote 16 matter, which council has discussed at some length and has broadened a little bit to also include persons who are residents of the village and who may or may not be U.S. citizens. So that's Section 6, which covers both of those issues. And then Section 29 was simply increasing the mayoral term from 2 years to 4 years.
Okay. So, questions or comments?
Yes, I
Yes.
think that at a future date, not too much in the future, we need to discuss educational campaign regarding both of the issues, but particularly Vote 16.
Yes. Okay. Vote 16 / non-citizens, right? Okay. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. So then, also emphasize that this is one of the ways that we can put something on the ballot for a charter amendment. So if we do approve this resolution, then the next process will be Judy will submit this to the Board of Elections, and it's being proposed to be on the November ballot.
And a comment towards the education campaign, things will sort of fall like dominoes, because once it goes to the Board of Elections, it will then get sent up to the Secretary of State so that we can assure how those rosters of voters will be kept. And once we know that, then the education campaign can occur, because at present, we're not entirely clear as to how that will work, but that will all be worked out.
Okay, all right. And yeah, as Judy said, we've discussed this for a while now, but I will emphasize that this, because it's a local initiative, will only affect local elections. So that would mean council, the mayor, as well as any sort of referendums or initiatives that happen on the local level. And the goal behind this, which we will be educating people on, is to be more inclusive about voting. This is something that many communities in other states have done, and Because Ohio is a home rule state, we believe that it fits the parameters of what can happen in the state of Ohio. As long as a charter does not go against anything in state law, it is viable. So right now, what the state constitution says is if you are 18 and a citizen, you can vote, but it doesn't say anything to the negative about if you're under 18 or if you're not a citizen that you can't, which is why we believe that this is a legal thing to do under our charter. Okay? Any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Oh.
We do need to open a public hearing, and it is an ordinance, so we do have to roll.
Is it an ordinance?
Yes.
Oh, you're right. Sorry about that. Okay, so, yeah, so since this is an ordinance, I will open the public hearing. So I'll again ask for any questions or comments. Yes, Dave?
David Turner, some more. When you said education, were you talking about educating the young voters?
No, we mean,
Educating the community about this issue.
About the, oh, okay, well, all right, because one of the concerns I have is that, changing the voting age for young people is going to potentially create a significant voting block of 16, 17-year-olds, if I understand it correctly, there's another 100 people, assuming they all go and vote the same way, but they're even more impressionable than older voters with computers are, and I think it would be good to spend some energy to, in whatever way, either get somebody in the school system or you guys, somebody, take some time, and of course it means money probably, educating people so that they know a little bit about voting and the issues and the candidates, instead of just saying, okay, you can now vote. If you're going to go down the road of doing what a lot of other people are doing, then the reason for doing it is to encourage younger people to vote, and just saying, go, you can now drive a car doesn't happen. You have to learn how to drive the car. So some education in that regard, I think, would be wise and useful.
yep. Thanks, Dave. Good point. Karen?
I would wonder if school elections were part of this, or is this just municipal elections? That might be something to clarify. And also, I had another thought, and it just absolutely went out of my head, so I'll sit down.
All right, well, if you think about it.
That's a good point.
So we have communicated with the school board and let them know that we're moving forward with this. And in fact, many communities that have done Vote 16 have made it exclusive for school board. We apparently do not have the purview to do anything about that, but we certainly encourage the school board to think about it. Similarly, the township was, the other group that we looked at, and same kind of thing. So according to our legal counsel, at this point, we can, focus on, the village, but we hope that it sets a precedent. Yes?
The education piece, you may have to have a levy committee to do
Yes.
that.
Yeah, good point. And yeah, we definitely need to set that up. And Dave, I do want to say that in past conversations, we have talked about, that we want to reach out to the schools in that way, to get students excited, but also understand what those obligations are. The research that we've done highlights that, and you already said this, that when people start voting earlier, they tend to continue those habits. And also states like Maryland, San Francisco has this, Chicago. The research also suggests that 16 and 17-year-olds have the intellectual ability to wrap their heads around legal issues just as well as 18 to 23-year-olds. So,
That's scary.
Yes. Yeah, it does say something, doesn't it? Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, so I'm going to close the public hearing, and Judy, I guess we'll do a roll call.
Indeed. Krieger.
Yes.
Sanford.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes. Okay. Next up, we've got ordinance 2019-30, and we can also do that by title only.
This is approving the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances and resolutions as parts of the various component codes of the codified ordinances, approving, adopting, and enacting new matter in the updated and revised codified ordinances, repealing ordinances and resolutions in conflict therewith, publishing the enactment of new matter, and declaring an emergency.
Okay, can I get a motion, please?
I move.
Second?
Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing, and Judy, is this to you to explain why it's an emergency?
It is always presented as an emergency because publication has started with American Legal. Once they send us this, they are actually starting to produce, and, well, in fact, they've sent us the pages, so we're supposed to be already putting it into motion.
Okay.
So they want it adopted as soon as possible.
Okay. I have one question. So are these all updates and revisions that the village passed, or is some of this ORC stuff?
It is, some of it's ORC. So when they review our code each year with our ordinances, they check all of the police matters, for example, against state code to see if anything's changed at that level, and they update those.
Okay. Because, yeah, as I looked at that list, I was like, did we pass e-bike legislation? I mean, which I know the state did, but,
Yes.
I was like, wow, we didn't do that much. So, okay, well, that's good to know. So this is making us current with both what we've revised or passed as well as what the state's done.
Correct.
Okay, great. Okay, any other questions or comments? All right.
Just looked like a lot of reading
Yeah.
to understand all these. I'm glad someone knows them all.
Yes. All right, so, so I'm going to close the public hearing and we'll do a roll call.
All right, Stokes.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Sanford.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes. Okay, now we're into resolutions, and first up is 2019-34. Yeah, I think we can do that by title only.
Let me just find that guy. This is authorizing the village manager to enter into an agreement with Community Planning Insights LLC.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second?
All right, Denise?
So the Planning Commission, we received 6 requests for proposals from different companies. Planning Commission received all 6 of those. I believe council received all 6 of those as well. Staff went through 2 processes. We narrowed it down with the previous village manager down to our top, from 6 to 3. And then with the new village manager, we reviewed those top 3 from staff's level and ranked our preference in order of first, second, third. Planning Commission went along with that recommendation from staff. However, they did want to meet with the top candidate just to see and ask more questions and get a feel for him and his team. They did that at the last Planning Commission meeting. I personally felt like he was really understanding what it is that we wanted out of this process. It's a little different this go-round because we're really wanting to do an online type of comprehensive land use plan. And we already have so many studies in existence, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So we really needed someone who could take the active transportation plan and incorporate it into the comprehensive land use plan, who could take the housing needs assessment study and incorporate that in, data that we already have existing, rather than having all these pieces out there and not being utilized fully into one document. And then if somebody wants to read the 450-some pages of the land use, of the housing needs assessment, there'll be links to that. So we were very pleased with that choice.
So that was one of my questions. So related to the online piece, so I like how they want to, launch a website from the beginning to make that part of getting, input and everything. So post-consultant, how are we going to maintain that website?
It would be maintained at staff's level. When new studies happen, they can be linked into it. If there's a need for some revision to the comprehensive plan, then we'll have to go back and see exactly if that process needs to be in a draft that comes to Planning Commission and on to council for approval to add it in.
So this is going to be a website that's fairly user-friendly?
That's what we were told.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so I think that's one thing we've got to confirm because, you know, we know from our village website that we had some issues there. Is there going to be word search capability? You know, so beyond
I
just
did
like.
not ask that, but
Okay.
he did say that that it'll be easy to use, so easy
Okay.
to navigate, easy to use.
So I guess that's another thought I have is that, you know, it's one thing just to like link a 400-page document, you know, on a
Right.
website, but for, you know, someone to be able to use it, there's got to be some search capability, I think.
Yes, and I imagine that it would have that.
Okay.
And just in today's time, that the whole purpose of creating this website is to have public engagement, so folks can scroll through the documents, and it's a website that can be easily updated with new content. So the approach is to be customer or resident oriented, and it's easy for the residents to have access to the information. So, but we can get clarification on the platform that it would be created on, what technology capabilities it will have. So, for example, are the individuals with visual impairments, could they still have access to the information? Is it readable with some of these devices? So we can follow up with those questions.
Yeah, I think that's pretty important to pin down again because, you know, when we went with eGov, which, you know, part of that was we thought about like it was a financial piece. You know, what we started to face was that, you know, the promises about, you know, user friendliness
Right.
didn't match. So,
Yeah, I did go and look at some of his references, and MSP, which does the graphics, and of course, we're already familiar with LGB, so.
Yep.
And, you know, what I saw, he was involved in Fort McKinley area, North Dayton. It was really, it worked. I mean, I could find what I needed to find. There were great maps and.
cool. Other, yeah, Mary Ann?
Yeah, so I attended the meeting where Aaron Sorrell and the other two people from the other organizations came. I'm very impressed, and I think that this has the potential for engaging a lot of people in the community in different ways, and I would suggest that council watch the planning commission meeting, the last planning commission, where they made a presentation, there were questions back and forth. And I think council should be engaged, you know, get the questions, get the ideas out in the beginning, because my understanding is that at the next, I'm not sure if it will be the next planning commission, but very soon, there will be a probably there will be a steering committee, and some of the things that need to be discussed will need to get put into the pot early on.
And I did want to say something related to that. So I watched the meeting and
Uh-huh.
you know, looked at the proposal. One of the things that I feel is missing is, and I don't know what the best title is, but a phase zero, which is kind of, I thought of it as sort of an initial scope and some essentials around what we need to cover. So the way it's proposed is that, you know, the steering committee will, you know, and some community input would guide that. But I guess I want to make sure, and this is a way for council to participate, that some essential things are definitely going to be covered. One of those is, there was a promise that parking was going to be part of this, you know, this comp plan update. So I want to make sure that those things are listed up front, because I didn't see those in the proposal. And, I mean, I think some of them are pretty obvious, like things that we would, you know, want to happen, but I just don't want those to get missed.
I do know that there was a discussion about having an initial work session, and that, you know, if not, we could have one or two planning commission, or council members at this, where planning commission's meeting with him and his team. So maybe we could have, well, one extra council member, besides Mary Ann,
Um,
unless we,
And Lisa and I, ideally.
are you two, okay, yeah, so,
Yeah, and I think as long as,
Possibility, too.
you know, if council just has a chance, you know, at the front end to weigh in on those things, if, you know, something's not mentioned. And, I mean, I will say, I love the proposal, I love their approach, philosophy, but I'm just thinking about some of these essential things that sometimes get lost in the shuffle. Lisa, were you gonna?
Well, you know, the more I spent time with those proposals and then again with this packet, the more I realized the scope of the work. And particularly when I think the citizen engagement piece is really good, but I'm always thinking in terms of a calendar and citizen engagement burnout factor. It's like when you have too many surveys or like too many meetings. And then it looks like this would happen sometime between August and October. And I think it would be a good idea for us to think about what are the various citizen engagement opportunities that we are presenting to our community from now till the end of the year. And just be really intentional about that, because it's likely there'll be more engagement around policing, there's about housing, right? And about, you know, separate from this. So I just don't want to.
So coordinating.
Yeah, I think we really need to coordinate. If we can combine, you know, if we convene and we have a group and we can combine certain things, I think we should. I just want to have good participation and not have people just get numb to, you know, oh, yet another thing, you know?
So we should probably have some kind of calendar that lists the various things that are going on and when they're happening.
Right.
That's
Yes.
something that I bet you'd be.
Yes, we can do that.
Very
I
helpful.
have the Yellow Springs News calendar on my phone, and it's long. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of things that are happening in the community that we'll be competing with.
Yeah.
A plug for Yellow Springs News, it's a Google Calendar, so it's easy to integrate that with your calendar.
And if we think about the active transportation plan, you know, we did take advantage of, you know, the farmer's market, street fair, we had a booth. So, you know, I think that's a great way to think about this, is when are there opportunities where people are gonna be there that we can grab them?
And not to even mention the participatory budgeting idea, you know, when you
Correct.
have that layered on,
I
it's
think
just,
that's why I think we're not
we're worried
doing
about that, yeah.
well, and I think that if that can be, some of the stakeholders from these different areas can also be part of the steering committee. I mean, that might be a possibility too.
Canetta? Okay. So one other thing is, I saw the proposal to call this Plan YS, and I think we could think about a better name. So, you know, I just kind of.
Yeah, he just threw that out
Yeah,
there.
so, you know,
if you
I
have a
mean.
suggestion, please.
Well,
send
I
it.
mean, I didn't have much time to think about it, but I thought about like maybe sustainable YS or something, but, you know, just something that's a little bit more meaningful than just, oh, it's a plan, you know? I mean, it's great that we're planning, you know, but, so, you know, anyway, like as we move down the path, something more interesting there. Okay, any other questions or comments?
So have we agreed that that Lisa and I would be the council representatives in this process, or do we want to, and we don't need to necessarily talk about it right now, but would you say
I'm good with that.
At least at this point, that would be the case?
Yep. As, you know, as long as we, you know, like you said, the council's actively engaged in this, because I think we've all got things that we're involved in that are going to be part of this, you know. Active transportation plan, of course, is something I love to hear about and, you know, part of where I would want to weigh in. So I want to make a motion to add a whereas to this resolution, and so I kind of roughly crafted what it would be. But one thing I thought was lacking in this resolution was something about why we're updating our comprehensive land use plan, so, and why this is important. So I wrote something to the extent of, whereas it is critical that the Village of Yellow Springs regularly update its comprehensive land use plan to effectively accomplish economic and community development goals. So I mean, if anyone has a different idea, but I think it's important in this resolution to also establish why this is an important investment to make. Okay. So if that sounds good, I'll make a motion to approve as amended.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. And thank you, Denise and the Planning Commission, for the hard work on this. Very much appreciated. Okay. So next up, we have Resolution 2019-35, and can we read that in full?
Certainly, this is supporting the Greene County Master Trail Planning effort, and whereas Greene County is home to over 68 miles of paved multi-use trails, 36 miles of river trails, and a wide variety of hiking, mountain bike, and equestrian trails, and is part of the nation's largest paved trail network. And whereas more than 1 million individuals, both local residents and visitors, annually utilize Greene County's growing paved trails network, and Greene County's municipalities have extraordinary opportunities with the Ohio to Erie Trail, connecting Cincinnati to Cleveland, and the Great American Rail Trail Initiative, a cross-country trail that connects Washington, D.C. to Washington State, traversing our region. And whereas there is a desire to develop a unified vision for trail development among partnering local governments, Greene County Parks and Trails, Regional Planning and Coordinating Commission of Greene County, Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission, and other stakeholders. And whereas Council for the Village of Yellow Springs recognizes the benefits of trails and trail planning, which include creating healthy, thriving communities, revitalizing neighborhoods and increasing property values, promoting economic development and growth, providing safe recreational and transportation opportunities for all ages and abilities, helping to retain and attract residents and businesses, closing gaps in the trails network, increasing individual choice of travel mode and facilitating active transportation, reducing roadway congestion and improving air quality, and enabling extension of valuable infrastructure into rural areas such as water, sewer, broadband, fiber, and other utilities. And whereas trails support the health, safety, and well-being of the general public within and surrounding our community, now therefore be it resolved that, Section 1, Council for the Village of Yellow Springs does hereby proclaim its full support for the efforts of Greene County Parks and Trails and Regional Planning and Coordinating Commission of Greene County to develop a Greene County Master Trails Plan, and will participate in the planning process and will provide assistance within the capacity of our resources.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
Okay. All right, I'll speak briefly to this. So I think some of you may know, on June 24th, we had a meeting here at our community center with most municipalities in Greene County represented. There was a lot of excitement around moving this forward. Greene County Parks and Trails has agreed to fund this effort. And I just left a meeting earlier this afternoon where I found out there's $2.7 million in the Greene County Trail Fund. So if we have a plan, we can really start to make some progress in terms of, not only the Yellow Springs Clifton Connector initiative, but other things that relate to our active transportation plan. Super exciting. We've got folks like Melissa Dodd and Bellbrook, who's really excited about this. And the other cool thing is we're the first municipality to pass this resolution. But all the municipalities in Greene County are going to do likewise, I believe. So there's a lot of support around this initiative, and I think it makes a lot of sense given how much the trail means for Yellow Springs. So, questions or comments? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Last resolution is 2019-36, and I think we can do that by title only.
All right, this is authorizing the village manager to enter into an agreement with the Yellow Springs Community Foundation for fiscal sponsorship of the village's utility roundup program.
Can I get a motion, please?
I move.
Second.
Okay. Josue?
Thank you. We have an exciting opportunity to apply for funding, veterans nonprofit grants. We as a municipality cannot apply for it directly because we're a municipal government, but we found a partnership, we found a partner in the community, in the Yellow Springs Community Foundation, to act as our fiscal agent and apply for funding for this grant. This will help offset the cost of the utility roundup program, so provide a direct donation to cover utility bills.
Okay. Questions or comments? Kevin?
Connor Jameson, our middle fellow, was here for a moment, but she's actually at this very moment at the World House Choir celebration, getting donations and getting folks to sign up. So Connor has really been working hard to move the utility roundup program to where it is now. And I understand that it's a possibility of her Miller Fellowship terming out or coming to the end of the term. Hopefully she'll be renewed. She's really been the catalyst to get this going, and so I really do hope that either she's able to continue to push this program forward, or we consider making modifications to the program so that more people can more readily enroll into the utility roundup program.
Okay. Any other, Emily?
I'm Emily Seibel, and I was just wondering if you've had your site visit with Rachel Goodspeed yet, or if you want an introduction with the Vectren Foundation. They're one of our biggest supporters. And also just how you selected 5,000, because I think they have an appetite and an ability to probably give more than that.
I would appreciate an introduction, Emily. I just came on board on this project, and the first step was to find that fiscal sponsored. The next step is working through an application process and figuring out the details of the budget, what will be the program objectives. Now, we know them, we know the general objectives, which is to get money for the utility roundup program that would help offset utility bills for residents. There's also a marketing component. We want to create a sustainable program. Kevin mentioned Connor. I don't think we will be where we are now without the support for Connor. And we don't know if we'll have access to Connor. So we need to have the right marketing mechanism in place to ensure that the program is sustainable.
I would like to note that I'm going to ask at a future meeting that council discuss, and there would have to be staff involvement, changing it from an opt-out rather than an opt-in program. And we don't
change it.
need to talk about it now, because I
Well,
don't want
just
to
for
get into
clarification, change it from opt-in to opt-out. Currently, it's opt-in.
change it to opt-out.
Correct.
From opt-in, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Yeah, and that was something we talked about at our retreat on Friday, which, I think we will add to the agenda. So, and Emily, where did you, when you said 5,000, where did you get that from?
Didn't you say that?
No, we don't have a figure of what we're asking for yet. We don't have an application.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was like, oh, did I? All right. But that's good. That's good to know that we should go after more than 5,000.
I think you may have heard it because we had an initial grant from the Community Foundation that got us started, a very generous grant from the Community Foundation that is not enough to keep it going sustainably. So that's where that number came from, I think.
Thank you, I'm glad I'm not.
No, you did not dream
Well,
it.
that's a different conversation.
So I love this. Very exciting that this opportunity is there. I'd like to make a motion to add something to the fifth whereas. Again, this is in the spirit of highlighting why this is an important program. So I thought we could add at the end something like, which supports affordability and promotes a diverse and inclusive community. So, I'll make a motion to approve with as amended.
I second that motion.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, legislation is done. Wow, all right. Okay, yeah, and let's try not to have that heavy of a legislation load again. All right, so we're on to special reports, and Emily Seibel, I believe you are up. So, thanks for being here.
Nice infographic.
Hello.
Hey.
Are you ready? I just set the clock. I will do my very best to keep it to 10 minutes. So I'm Emily Seibel. I'm the Executive Director of Yellow Springs Home Inc., and I appreciate the opportunity to be here to present to you today. And we are here celebrating 20 years of acting as a resource to serve our community and its people. The next slide. Who's doing that? Oh, thanks. All right, so nationally, there is a growing gap, affordability gap. And I want to just point out at the fine print at the bottom of this slide, which is that the median income in Yellow Springs cannot afford the median home sale price. And the market values are outpacing income, and it's getting increasing, more rapid, and it's really a national crisis. There are no counties in the United States of America today where a full-time minimum wage job can support fair market rent of a two-bedroom apartment. And ultimately, it is the sustainability and diversity of our community as a whole that suffers alongside our residents. I wanted to show you a real-time example of the affordable housing gap in Yellow Springs. And as you can see in this example, we are shutting out more than 60% of the population through our current home sale prices. So I actually pulled off the MLS all of the homes for sale last Thursday that were 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, and took the median, and then I did an affordability analysis using a tool we have in-house. There are a lot of assumptions built in there, but you know, we wanted to look at things like likely private mortgage insurance, a 3% down payment, closing costs, and we put all of that in. Debt not a limiting factor, and you would have to earn 127.5% of area median income, and your housing payment would probably be somewhere around $1,820 per month to afford the median home sale price, and that is just for 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. I didn't go to 4 because it just got worse. So what I want to just illustrate with this slide is that you know, the market is not going to build us out of this problem. And this also doesn't take into account the cost of needed repairs, the quality of the homes that are for sale, and new construction prices are going to naturally be higher than this. So to be a welcoming and income diverse community and the kind of village that we truly want to be, to live our values, we need to come together collaboratively to find a solution. And I believe that it is time for a public intervention. That said, I also truly believe that we can be a sustainable village with a balanced population. We have a unique opportunity in Yellow Springs to be one of the most welcoming communities in the country, and affordable housing is one piece of a comprehensive strategy to do that. But I do believe that we're small enough to actually create a national example. And Yellow Springs Home Inc. is already providing a national example because, as you may or may not know, we are the smallest service area community land trust anywhere in the United States, to my knowledge. I've been looking for someone for 10 years that has as focused of a service area as we do, and there simply is not another community land trust of this scale. And so we're very fortunate to have this resource here in Yellow Springs, and it's really a testament to how strong our community is. And so what distinguishes a community land trust from traditional real estate development is that in traditional real estate development, a handful of investors typically benefit from the strong market in the communities that they build in. Whereas in a community land trust, it is the community that receives the investment benefits through permanently affordable housing. We act as a voice for the people of Yellow Springs, and we consider our purpose one of public benefit. For 20 years, we have been building expertise and investing in Yellow Springs, providing community stability in our service area, which we desperately need, and it is a growing problem. Unlike traditional real estate and even traditional affordable housing development under the current programs that are out there, We're creating a sustainable, affordable model by ensuring to the very best of our ability that every single dollar that is invested in an affordable community land trust home will serve the community forever. Every other kind of affordable housing out there has an affordability period. It might be 5 years, it might be 15 years. But I think what we're finding is that a lot of programs ultimately price themselves out and end up displacing residents and pushing poverty from place to place. So this is truly a long-term solution to the affordability problem. And acting as a developer that doesn't go away, we also provide ongoing stewardship services which are central to the community land trust model. I'm very proud to say that over the last 20 years, we have not had a single foreclosure, and no home has ever needed additional subsidy at resale to be move-in ready with no deferred maintenance and affordably priced. So in Yellow Springs, this model is really working, and a great example of that is our very first home at 321 South High Street, which is now on its 4th homeowners. Everyone who sold moved into market rate housing. The homeowner is on our board of directors, and there's more subsidy today in the house than there was when it came online under the hand-painted Let's Build a House banner. Stewardship includes a range of services focused on the stewardship of land, homes, and ongoing affordability by supporting clients before, during, and after purchasing or renting a home. Our client programs reached 125 households last year. I think a lot of times we see the houses that Home Inc. builds, but we don't always, it's not as easy to see the kinds of financial coaching support we're giving to residents in our service area. And so that's through financial coaching, facilitating resales, foreclosure prevention. We offer low-interest USDA mortgages that we package in-house, and you can purchase a home outside of our program with those. And we also provide grants now for home repair. So we'd like to do more to support the existing homeowners of Yellow Springs and residents, because we understand that people are struggling, that are existing homeowners. And this year was our pilot program to do just that, and we'd like to build on that and add different programs. But right now we're serving 5 households in Yellow Springs with repair grants of up to $7,500 each, and we invited residents to apply, and those are now being carried out. Our mission is to strengthen community and diversity in Yellow Springs and Miami Township by providing permanently affordable and sustainable housing through our community land trust. I cannot say enough that we are part of the fabric of Yellow Springs and an extension of your and our community's commitment to affordability. We are accountable to villagers as a membership organization with elected representative governance. We are here to steward land for the community benefit forever, and we have parallel values and goals with the village. And as you can see on the slide, we were created through the village 20 years ago. So we integrate resident feedback into every aspect of the organization, as do you. And that's from management to siting to design to the type of housing we do, what kinds of programs we offer, and the way that we govern. And our bylaws require participatory governance from not only the community, but the constituency that we're serving. And it's also required in our bylaws, not only to have that participatory governance, but to integrate community feedback into everything we do. And so here's an example, our Forest Village Homes project. I think we signed the last lease today. So there is definitely a pent-up demand for rentals. That is not surprising. But I do just want to reiterate that the highest priority need in the housing needs assessment is low and moderate income rentals, benefiting those populations. And it's something that we relatively recently expanded into. It requires a whole different set of capacities. And so we're rolling that out right now. We've finished our first one and on to the next one. We received close to 50 completed applications for this project, which is specifically serving people with special needs and seniors, making 60% or less of area median income. And by layering funding through all of these different federally regulated state and banking agencies, because we actually combined some funding that had never been combined before and had contrasting regulations. So then the state attorneys got involved, and now we're ready to do it again, and it'll be a lot easier. But we ended up with 7 different design standards and certifications that we had to meet. So we had all of these matrices, thank you. Matrices, just showing what we could and couldn't do, and had lots of layers. So they're well regulated. And then I just want to note that we also price all of our rentals, and we will continue to price them so that they're in line with the Section 8 limits. And we do accept those housing choice vouchers at all of our rental properties. Oh, wait, go back one.
Another one yet?
No, the other way.
Forward?
No, they were there we go. I think I updated the presentation since I sent it to you, but, okay, so then here are the interiors of those units. I really want to highlight the energy efficiency. We got HERS scores, which stands for Home Energy Rating System score of 45 to 48, which is not net zero, but it's by far the most energy efficient units we've been able to build. And an existing conventional home of the same size would be 100, and so the lower you go, the more energy efficient it is. So we surpassed our own goals, which were an energy improvement over the existing housing stock pretty considerably. And then there are also a lot of environmental, green communities, material-related criteria that we had to meet, like no VOC paints and other elements. So the result is this replicable product that we really want to do again, but it also showcases an opportunity for what additional layers of funding could do to meet the growing gaps more flexibly, broadening the clientele that we're able to serve. And now back to the filling the gaps one. There you go. Thank you. And so our primary funders are the Ohio Housing Finance Agency and the Federal Home Loan Bank of Cincinnati. Neither of those will fund an entire project, and with the Federal Home Loan Bank, the more you ask for, the more restrictions they place on the project in terms of serving a lower area median income or meeting a priority population such as homeless or persons with special needs. So to close the gap, we've had to be very creative, which can also be very slow-paced. Some of our projects that are even just 1 or 2 units have had 11, 12 funding sources, but we're very dedicated to getting it done. And then finding and holding land is also a pretty big challenge, which is why Cemetery Street, which is seen here, was such an effective public-private partnership. And some examples of products that we would really like to explore moving forward, which are gaps in the housing needs assessment, are non-tax credit rentals for families. And this is actually the biggest gap in our community and in our market, and it is one of the hardest to fill with the current funding mix, because we just can't layer things together to be able to serve those unrestricted family populations. Also, home ownership and rentals, for those of moderate income making over 80%, we would consider that moderate income housing 80 to perhaps 120%, and there is no funding available for that population. Through a program, an affordable housing program. And also home ownership products. The state doesn't fund home ownership, so we have to be resilient and creative to do it. And a great example is the Glen Cottages Pocket neighborhood that the village is providing a layer of investment in, which is making a big difference. We would also like to look more and increasingly into mixed income products and neighborhoods, and then programs for existing homeowners and to improve the existing housing stock. So now, looking to the future, I talked about Glen Cottages. That's a 12-unit pocket neighborhood. We're hoping to launch that later this year and are completing the pre-development right now. And that's going to serve a range of residents, half for sale, half rental, making less than 60%, and I'm anticipating there will probably be some extremely low-income renters, under 35%. That's what we've found in our testing, all the way up to 120%. And we were able to do that thanks to a capital campaign And we're really looking at this as a prototype of what is possible, learn from it, and perhaps partner with the village to replicate the best of that project on other sites. And then Yellow Springs Senior Housing is a project that we're still very actively pursuing. As you know, we went in for funding this year, and though we got a perfect score in not the first but the second tiebreaker, we did not score relatively high enough to gain an award. This year, it's an incredibly mature, competitive funding opportunity here in Ohio. So unfortunately, the scoring changed dramatically. Like they threw the old scorebook out the window and totally redid it. So right now we're working with our equity syndicator analysts and development team to see how relatively competitive we think we are under this new set of draft criteria, but we'll keep you posted as we move forward. So the next funding round for that is February 2020, and what we're hoping is that we would be able to apply in Q1, but our funding to procure the site allows for a minimum of 3 funding cycles before we even start thinking about a Plan B. So we see this as a process. So stay with us. And then just these 2 projects represent 66 units and more than $14 million of local economic development. We are really trying to step up to meet the needs of residents to the greatest extent possible, and we'd love to explore additional programs to serve residents collaboratively. Here you can see that our strategic plan timeline intentionally mirrors the adopted village housing goals timeline, 2019 to 2023. We see ourselves as expanding the capacity of the village to meet its housing goals and to live our values, helping to put programs and projects together, identifying and developing new products and programs, and providing ongoing support as well as expertise. This concept, this community land trust concept, is powerful and it is very proven here in Yellow Springs. And what we are hoping to do is create a layer of affordable housing that will benefit the community forever. Here, this is a selfie that our board took in 2018. So some of the faces have changed, but I thought you shouldn't think it's just me, because Home Inc. is a board and it's also the community. So we hope to clarify our working relationship with the village and engage in joint planning to serve our community members by creating lasting affordability, improved local housing options. That language is in our strategic plans moving forward, because it's not just about creating new, it's also looking at what we have and how to improve and strengthen that. And then also resident programs. So I'm here today to invite collaboration, which is a top priority for us moving forward. One more slide. So here are some additional resources. They're both very good. There's a policy toolkit for inclusive growth, and you get to pick whether you're an emerging cold or hot market, and then there are lots of tools how you can, and we're a hot market, by the way, but
It's good to know.
so you can look at that and then pick from the toolkit and explore. And a great example, something that I haven't spent time on in this 10-minute presentation is, for example, affirmative marketing and outreach can be a very powerful tool in a market such as ours, and we're working with partners, including the Chamber and the 365 Group and other entities, including Antioch College, to gain funds to be able to roll out a collaborative affirmative and marketing outreach plan for the whole village, not just for our products and programs, because we think that could really benefit the village. But I suggest as a next step, to further this collaboration, I know you're interested in, because you invited me here to talk about it, but I suggest as a next step I could sit down with Josue and perhaps the council member liaisons to the Housing Advisory Board, and we could just begin a dialogue about what we could do together to benefit us all. I don't have a specific set of recommendations right now, because I think we need to listen and learn and collaborate and really put our heads together to see what the priorities are. I think the big takeaway I would end with is just that this is an urgent problem that is rapidly growing more urgent, and we are doing everything we possibly can to meet the affordability needs of this community, but I truly believe and I know that if we partner and work together, we can achieve so much more and actually make a real difference. So I think this is absolutely the time to do that, and one full of opportunity, and really we can really achieve something powerful together.
All right. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
That was great. Questions?
Very informative. I like everything that I've read and heard, and I'm excited about seeing what the possibilities are with respect to future collaboration.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that is really interesting to me, and I think important for us all to hear, is just kind of understanding that community land trust piece. And I know one of the things that we've talked about a lot is how do we achieve that permanent affordability piece. And so does that, all of the homing projects?
Yes.
That is an aspect?
Yeah, it's in our bylaws that we have to steward the land in perpetuity, sort of like a conservation land trust is there to hold the development rights in perpetuity. We are there to ensure that the land is used for community benefit in perpetuity. The audacity of perpetuity, as they say. But yeah, so we do that. There are different mechanisms for different products. But for the for sale housing, it's pretty much self-perpetuating. So for the last 20 years at least, we haven't had to have any additional subsidy to make and keep the homes affordable. And then we are able to facilitate every resale to ensure that it goes to another person of low to moderate income at an affordable price while balancing the return to the individual. And that was a whole other presentation to talk about the legal mechanisms that we use, but it is a proven tool to, instead of capturing money back, like if you made a down payment loan to someone and then when they sold their house, you got that money back, you need more and more money to serve fewer and fewer people because of inflation and the net present value of money, whereas this is it's a one-time investment and it stays affordable. With the rental properties, what we're doing is setting up the project so that it has hopefully adequate repair and reserve replacement funds. We have asset management strategies, and we're committed to going beyond the state mandated affordability period, which in this case is 30 years for the Forest Village Homes project. So in 30 years, we will re-strategize in what the next steps are, but if that safeguard wasn't in place, if the land trust wasn't involved, what happens to a lot of those properties is they're just sold and they become market rate rentals. And in a place that is has a market that is going up and up like it is here, I think that's a real risk.
So I think two things that really strike me in this sort of next steps that I appreciate you proposing is how we tackle that moderate income piece and, very importantly, housing for families. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the things where I'm not sure that the community fully appreciates that we are thinking about all of that with the housing assessment, right? This is, we want to address affordability and low-income housing, but we appreciate, as the schools have highlighted, that we want to find places for families, and
Yes.
and I know
I'm in
that
the struggle myself.
Yes, I know it's not easy. So, other questions or comments?
I would just say, Brian, that we are aligned in that interest.
Great.
Yeah, and we're also very open to collaborations and partnerships with other developers. As I think the senior housing project is a great example of that, but we could do. I think it would be really lovely, maybe through the DCIC or some other set of discussions, to bring in the schools, do a listening campaign. We always start with who we're trying to serve, and then we back into the product, and then we see what the gap is. is typically our process. So we would determine who are these young families?
Right,
How
right.
much money do they make? What kind of affordability challenges do they have? And what functionality do they need in the houses that they're living in? And then we would back into what's possible.
Well, thanks a lot, Emily.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. All
Yes,
right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Colleen, I believe we've got a quarterly financial report.
Okay. So I'll just go, we'll start off with the report summary that I give you every month. And just kind of highlight the revenue collected for June, $790,826.65. On the expense side for the month of June, we expended $989,158.79. The statement of cash, again, is the balance basically in all the funds. We have an ending balance of $6,353,942.91, and it shows your bank reconciliations. Any questions on the summary? The second page is the utility roundup accounting sheet. And as of this report, which is the end of June, we had 3 additional signups for a total year-to-date of 255 residents. Based on an estimated 1,800 residential customers or residents in the town, that's about a 14% sign up. The revenue that we collected for June just from donations for the year, the roundup, was $352.43. We had no applications for assistance. Our ending balance is now $6,624.84. And then Kevin, you had sent an email, and I believe everybody hopefully got the revision with answers. Is there any questions on any of that?
Well, I'm curious why we haven't had any applications for assistance the last 2 months.
There hasn't been any need. Nobody's been on the shut-off that needed assistance.
And, and why do you think that is?
Summer, the bills aren't as high as winter, and
Okay.
we don't, typically, and I've been down in the utilities office for the last 3 or 4 days helping out, and what we're coming up with in the average is maybe 3 applicants a month, and that would be for a year round, that would need assistance. So the program is trying to sustain. We are getting more efforts from Connor and from the group with just getting the program out there. We have people come to the counter and ask about it. I had one today about the program. We do have some that know about the program and choose not to participate, but we are getting a lot of participation. So it's a slow going, but I think just keeping that word out is being very positive. But that is, the last 2 months, we have not had any assistance request.
Okay.
Any other questions on the roundup?
Just want to thank you again for that additional information. That's,
You are more than welcome.
was very helpful.
Good.
Thank you.
And then the third report that I include is your boards and commissions, and it's just a little spreadsheet to kind of keep you updated on the available money that you have in your budgets to spend and what you have spent. Again, this was through June. We've had a couple that came in July, so it'll be updated next month. Any questions on that? Okay, then, since it is the quarterly financials that we need approval, you have the full set. We have the bank report, the position statement of cash, your total revenue, and your expense. So without going into detail, I will just entertain any questions that you might have, and if you could help tell me what report we're looking at and what page.
I don't have a particular question, but I just would like your assessment of how the quarter went in terms of income and expenses. Do you think that it's basically following the budget? Anything that we should be concerned about?
I think our revenue is very well on target from what I had went through and reviewed. I have a couple things highlighted to keep an eye on. Nothing that I'm concerned with on the revenue. On the expenditures, being halfway through the year and a target of 50%, again, it's a little hard to read because the appropriations that are encumbrance, the open
Yeah.
purchase orders, kind of reflect some of those totals. But I went through by fund, and there is, in the 204, the building fund was coming up short, but that will rectify itself here in July. That is part of the supplemental that we requested last month to help with the air conditioner unit. So we had a couple of negative fund balances. The part-time wages, we might need to come back with a supplemental towards the end of the year. We've had a few extra employees that were not in the original budget. And then I had, if we talk about moving the money over to the economic development, that will have to be included in a supplemental too. That's still in the fund balance. It was never in the appropriations.
Okay.
So other than that, I believe we're really good halfway through. The third quarter, it'll start, getting more defined, and at that point, we start working on our budget for the next year too. So those figures will tell me a lot.
So going back to the, I guess, third page on commissions, so is the way we're segmenting this out is special events is kind of the money that, that council is sort of assigning? I mean, I see that they've got, art or HRC next to them, but these are the additional funds that we've approved for things like YS Pride, is that right?
Out of the special events, yes. And
So we're keeping that separate from the HRC and Arts and
HRC
Culture
and Arts,
Commission?
I'm just breaking that down. But
Right.
on our actual budget, the dollar amounts are either in special events, operating supplies, other contractual, and we have so much money, and all that totals 25,000.
Okay.
And then each of your commissions requested a certain amount. So it's kind of a two-part little spreadsheet. Shows who's using what, but out of what expense account, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Okay.
And
And
then-
we still have only spent 3,000 as of June out of the 25.
Yep. And investments. So how are things looking with Star Ohio, Star Plus?
Last month's reports were still over the 2%. They were still doing excellent, and if that would continue, I'm still on track estimating that our interest alone would be around that 170,000 for the year. However, at the last training class, and Josue has also mentioned, we're hearing a little bit of concern that Star Ohio might start reducing that rate, and we were going to probably need the investment meeting to talk about maybe it might be the time to look at some other options. But as of June, and the Star Ohio is still higher than some of the other CDs at that point. So we have a little time, but we need to be looking at it.
Yeah, and that was something on my mind, is that, I would like to make sure that we convene soon. And I guess one of the things I want to assess is, again, do we have that in-house expertise to manage these funds? Or, we've talked about whether we should have that outside support, so.
When it starts getting to higher than the Star Ohio and Star Plus, yes, I prefer outside influence with those kind of decisions for that type of investment, unless Josue has. I don't have it, and but up to this point, I was very comfortable with the interest rates where we have it at right now, but if that changes, I would need some support.
Yes. So our next steps is to convene the investment committee
Yep.
and look at what we have, what all of our assets are. And if we see things that we can make a change on, we'll follow the current investment policy, which first is preserve capital to minimal risk. So by those two guiding principles, we're looking at CDs. And what CDs could we buy either through the partnerships that we have, Star Ohio, Star Plus, and the Huntington Investments. So look at what's available to us to buy. And we have the skill set to look at what CDs, whether the rates the CDs are going for, what are their timeframes, and we can make our own informed decisions about what is available to us to sell or wait until it matures, and what new securities we can buy, invest in, and how long we can hold them for. So based on the guiding principles of the investment policy, we are restricted and limited to CDs and other secure, low risk or no risk securities. So,
Okay.
but
And I guess the other thing that would be on that agenda is, I had asked the last time whether we could move more out of US Bank. And so I want to continue to think about that,
Okay.
right? You know, just because we know Star Ohio, we can grab it really quick if we need it.
right, that's something for us to look at. What are our 30 to 90 days demand for cash? And we can put that in money market accounts where we're earning some interest. And anything above that 90-day cash requirement, we could look at making something more than 90-day term commitment. So
Okay.
we could look at buying 6-month CDs and 9-month CDs and 12-month CDs or other securities that could mature and we could ladder the securities so that we have a constant access to cash that we need.
All right. Okay, other questions?
Did I cover that? Okay.
All right, it's looking good. Thanks, Colleen.
Then we need a motion to.
Yes, a motion to approve the quarterly financial report.
I move that we approve the quarterly financial report.
A second?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thanks again,
Thank you.
Colleen. Okay, next up, we have citizen concerns. This is the point on the agenda where if there's anything not on the agenda, we welcome any comments. Okay, yes, Megan?
Hi, Megan Bachman, Yellow Springs News. My concern is that it's very late. And this is one of the things that I know that happened at the same time that the rules were changed around what's acceptable behavior in council, that citizens' concerns were moved till after special reports. So I'm just noting that it's 9:15 and possibly another disincentive to people coming in, sharing their thoughts with council.
Thanks, Megan. Okay, let's talk about old business. And there was a suggestion that we could move local solar up top, because we heard that Dave Turner was interested in talking about that. So I think, Josue, you want to kick that one off?
Yes, thank you. All right, this is to provide an update from the last council meeting that we had. There's a lot of interest in revisiting our residential solar cap of 1%. So we've met with the residential solar group to discuss a resolution that would raise or eliminate the cap on residential solar. A potential resolution will either include a significant increase to the readiness for service charge for residential solar customers to cover operating and maintenance expense, or make an electric rate adjustment for buying generation from residential solar customers at a rate that allows the village to cover operating and maintenance expense. Elements of a resolution that will lead to a new ordinance will address: 1, future electric rate adjustments; 2, residential solar customers currently enrolled under the residential solar cap of 1%; and 3, the transferability of current interconnection agreements. Together, we crafted a timeline on what we think is reasonable and an expedited process for us to address all of these items and propose a new ordinance. So we're looking at meeting August 7th at 10 a.m. at the Art Room as a follow-up meeting with residential solar sponsors to review the framework of a new ordinance. And I will be looking at those two options. Could we make a change to the readiness for service charge, or have a rate adjustment that would allow us to capture the operating and maintenance expense? On August 12th, we proposed to have a community meeting for input on this proposed framework. That will take place at 7 p.m. here in the council chambers. This time slot will be replacing a meeting that was previously scheduled that will no longer take place. We'll be meeting instead of that group. And then we would, on August 19th, we will bring a proposal to council on the introduction of an ordinance and what this will look like. And September 3rd at 7 p.m. in council chambers, we'll have a second reading of the ordinance, and it should it be voted and approved, then we're looking at a October 3rd date as the effective date.
Okay,
Any questions on that?
it's a good plan. Mary Ann, did you have? Lisa or Kevin?
Go ahead.
So I mean, we've gotten lots of input from lots of folks. So I just wondered, when these meetings are taking place, is the entire, I guess maybe everybody wants the same thing. So I guess just want to be sure that when decisions are made, that there is a representative group present, so that, changes aren't made, but yet there's this other part of the community that isn't satisfied with what's proposed.
Right, and that group that is inside, let me take a step back. We're directly responding to a petition or a group of individuals that want to address this now. And what's driving that movement are two things. One, that we have a residential cap. We have a cap on who could have an interconnection agreement, and we've reached that cap. So anyone who's already in the works to install solar, they can still do it. We're not impeding on their rights to do that, and we encourage them to do that. However, they wouldn't be eligible for net metering agreement, the interconnection agreement. So we know we got that issue that we need to address. And then there's other motivating factor, which is the tax credit that, as in previous years, is scheduled to be phased December 31st, and folks want to make plans accordingly and install their systems well before the winter season, so they can put it in operation this year and qualify for that tax credit. So we're directly responding to a group of people that have mobilized to achieve this. Now, we, the administration, are very sensitive to the group that are not part of this process, particularly those that are concerned around the affordability of utility rates. So in our proposal, we're certainly looking to address the operating and maintenance expense, because we don't want to create an economic opportunity that outweighs the benefit for the residential solar versus those that are not installing solar for various reasons. They're either are not there, meaning they haven't planned it out, and they're not able to take advantage of this opportunity, or they can't afford it. So whatever process we settle on, we are very sensitive to burdening individuals with an additional rate cost or shifting the cost over to non-residential solar customers. So we're looking out for that group. In our schedule, we've created at least 3 opportunities where the community will have input and will have access to the information outside of the 9 to 5 business hours that the village staff operates. So we have one morning meeting, and then the other meetings are in the evening. I hope that our stakeholders, particularly Yellow Springs News, will continue to do such a great job of getting the information out. I know that for 2 publications, they've been getting information out. There's also a letter to the editor from one of the organizers of the movement to raise the residential cap. I thought it was a very effective letter in addressing or presenting what we're working on. So I think there's there's goodwill from the organizers to find a solution that is fair to the residential solars and those that are not part of the process. So I have a really good feeling that the right people are in the room, that we're looking out for everyone's interest. We're gonna know August 7th, because we have a pretty good proposal, at least the administration thinks so, that we're coming up with a fair rate to present that would cover the current operating expense of the system. And that expense is designed to not only cover all of our revenue requirements, but also, all the expense requirement, capturing the revenue to cover the expense, but also make investments in the future. So we're generating reserves that will be used to make capital improvements. And we want to continue that trajectory of not just covering expense, but saving for the future, investing in our future. So we're looking to preserve those key features right now in our rate structure.
Lisa?
I was just, this is just like a fact I realize I don't understand. So the Antioch Solar is separate from this in terms of contributing to the overall cap of solar in the village overall, right? Because you use the term residential solar, which to me exempts.
We have two caps. We have residential solar cap at 1% and commercial cap at 4%. Now, Antioch utilizes all of their generation to run their thermal plant, and that powers the buildings, primarily the gym. So they're using up all of their generation. So they're not operating at a capacity where they will sell anything to the village. But if they did, they are set up to generate to the grid. But,
I see.
But just operationally, they're not there.
Thank you, because I think that there's some, I've had a couple of conversations with community members that have this misapprehension that the solar at the college somehow took up the capacity, reducing the amount available within the cap for residential.
That's not the
So
case.
it's important, I think, that people understand that that is not the case.
Correct.
Right.
Thank you.
Also, one thing I want to highlight is Lisa and I discovered that the credit union is helping to support people that want to finance their own solar. And so I know Josue and I talked about engaging them in some of these meetings too, so that we
Yes.
can share that information.
We will be engaging them for the August 12th meeting, and that's an evening meeting, and that's with the community. So those that are not already signed up for solar, they come to this meeting, they'll learn about the services, the products and services that credit union has available to finance the installation.
Right?
Right.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, Dave?
Well, thanks for moving it up just for
Yeah.
me. And there was a pretty good explanation of what's going on. I think I have a few questions. I have a spreadsheet, of course, with 6 years of my data for my bills, and 6 years ago, my electricity cost me about 11 cents a kilowatt hour, and now it's about 16. So dollars that I paid divided by kilowatt hours. My understanding, however, is that there's a request for service and a something and a something, and all these things add up to my total electric cost. Is that right?
What are all the somethings?
If I pay $50 for 500 kilowatt hours, that cents per kilowatt hour is not made of one thing. It's made of 4 or 5 costs.
Correct.
You don't have to explain them to me. Request for service is one and something else. The main question I have is, if I make free electricity and I give it to you, why does it cost you more money?
Why does it cost me more money to get the electricity from you?
Here's 50 kilowatt. 50 kilowatt hours, just don't charge me for 50 kilowatt hours. When you're getting that electricity from me, is that electricity only paying for part of that total cost?
So what will be involved in the cost will be, one, to get that power from you back, to track it, and we have a personnel expense that's associated with that as well.
Request for services.
Right,
So when you're getting my electricity, you're not getting all of it, you're just getting a little bit of that total, that $50 in my example. I think if you nodded, I'd say, okay, I get it.
Are we
No.
missing the piece that we are
Yeah.
actually paying people for that electricity? That's at the crux of the issue, correct?
Yeah.
Well, right now we are, and we're
You're not paying me 16 cents per kilowatt hour.
Right,
but
because
I'm not
there's
paying-
the readiness for service goes into the capital improvements to
So you're
keep the
paying
system.
me, say, 10 cents a kilowatt hour, just to make up a number.
well, I don't want to just make up a number
Oh.
but yes, we are
Yeah.
paying you something, and that's
So
less.
if I'm paying 16 now, and you pay me 10 cents for for one of them, then you've got to make up the extra 6 cents, and that's why there's a cap, and if we go over the cap, you guys and the people who can't buy solar are screwed. Okay, that's fair. Well, that makes sense. I would explain that with fewer words to people, and it might make more sense, and your point's a good one about people thinking Antioch's part of it. That's perfectly reasonable. I have no problem with that, and I don't want anybody to raise the rates so that I can get solar. I think that's unfair. So I'm perfectly willing, got a plan to buy some solar panels, and I'm perfectly willing to just use the solar panels as long as that kilowatt hour use of mine comes off my bill. I don't care.
Right, and it comes off in two ways. One, whatever you're producing and you're using locally, that's something you're not buying from us.
Yeah, so by my generating it and not buying it from you, my bill goes down.
Correct.
I'm happy with that.
Yes.
You know, if you don't charge other people so that I can have solar.
Yes, and I
that's not-
think-
That isn't fair.
No, no,
Sure,
no,
I'm not
and-
gonna do that, but I'm,
But you make, within what you said, there's an important point to make, that there's some confusion about us blocking people from installing solar in their homes. Folks can install solar.
Oh, I'm
and
not
whenever-
saying that, but I
Yeah,
understand. I take your point. It's a
but
good point to
Some folks
make.
are saying that. So
Yeah.
just by you having solar and consuming what you produce, you're reducing your electricity bill. Because that's something you don't have to buy it from
Yeah.
us. Right, so that's happening.
Yeah, so I can cut my solar bill, my electricity bill down for just the cost of it.
Right,
No, I-
and we're not stopping anyone from doing that.
Yeah, I understand
We're not stopping
that.
you, yes.
I understand that, yeah,
Mhm.
I understand that. And I explain that to people when we have these discussions too. so-
Right.
So, okay,
Right,
great.
the other thing that I've become aware about is installers, the language that installers are using with their customers. That the grid will become their backup battery. That they'll produce it goes into the grid, and that's the battery, and you'll get all that electricity back. And so we're all not using the same terms, and there's confusion being created by various stakeholders that are involved. And so you know what's at stake here. You know that there's an operating maintenance expense. You can also help us clarify that with the other residents that are confused about this process.
Yeah, I do that, you know, I do that when I can. Great, that's all I had. Thank you very
All
much.
right, thanks,
Thank
David.
you.
Okay, hopping back up, briefly. Oh, Megan, yes, please.
Okay, because I just want to get clarity about the Antioch thing. First of all, I was here when the cap was first put on, and it was because it was like, okay, we have 5%. How are we going to divvy up the 5%? 4% to commercial. It was actually while Antioch was proposing it, and then 1% to the residential. So it's kind of connected, but not really. But I guess my other question really has to do with the 4%, because I was told that Antioch has used up that 4%. So, for example, there isn't any room for another commercial entity because it's not whether they're using it, it's the capacity, right? So you're not totaling up how much is actually coming on the grid from Antioch or any of the any of the residential installations. It's the capacity that you are approving. Is that correct?
Yes, I would say that in how we're tracking the applications, that would be correct, because what's being generated is maybe a different number, and that's dependent on, how much they're using at the local level or how much sun exposure we have in any given day. So yeah, so our applications are,
And the commercial is at its limit as well.
I would have to confirm that. I don't have the number in front of me.
Yeah, let's bring that back, because when I was doing the town gown talk, there was a lot of discussion about the Antioch College cap or whatever, so, all right, so we'll continue to provide more reports about solar. All right. Okay, boards and commissions, quickly. In our packets again was the roles and responsibilities for our non-quasi judicial commissions versus BZA and Planning Commission. I think those look good. Judy fixed those, and so, it basically is sensitive to their quasi judicial status. With the idea that we want all our commission members to sign role and responsibility statements. I will say I remain concerned about the fact that close to half of our commission members still have not signed these, and I don't understand why. So, Judy, one thing I would like in the next list of commission members is something that indicates who has not signed a form and who has not done sunshine law training, all right?
That would be very helpful.
Yes,
Yeah.
because this is, yeah.
Want that publicly, or do you want me to just get that out to you?
You can put it in the packet. I mean, I think that's fine.
I just, if I know any of my commission members haven't, then I will talk with them.
Right, but yeah, I just think,
And I
given,
don't care whether it's in the packet, but the sooner the better.
but yeah, I want that to get shored up. Yeah, given the responsibilities and the capacity that we're looking for with commissions, that needs to be taken care of. I think that's all I had on that. Anything else about boards and commissions? Okay. Revolving loan fund, Lisa.
Yeah, so I think we're moving forward on the revolving loan fund.
Yay.
I think. So we now have confirmed a way to have the revolving loan fund deposited in the credit union if we work with the community foundation. And I just really want to recognize how in almost every single council meeting, more than once, we're talking about actions that are possible because of collaboration with our wonderful community foundation. I'm so grateful to them because just as we and our staff have capacity problems, they do too, and yet they keep stepping up and stepping up and stepping up to support these collaborative initiatives. So you may recall that the last time that I talked about the revolving loan fund, I explained that the money is deposited in a certificate of deposit. It's not doled out, it's there as a security. So this is the same thing. If we gift the money to the community foundation, then they deposit in a certificate of deposit. And Gina Marie Cox, who's the executive director, has identified that the community foundation has a particular kind of fund that's called an agency fund. And when the village opens an agency fund, if we need to pull the money back, we can. And so I conferred with legal counsel, and he agreed that this is absolutely the right way to go. Obviously, you can get your money back if you want it back for some reason. Any money that's not collateralized. So if there's $35,000 on deposit and $20K in revolving loan fund money's been loaned out as security, then we could get like 15 back. It's very simple like that. So the next step for that, if council agrees that we keep marching forward, is that Gina Marie and the Community Foundation will provide us with their standard agency fund agreement. And I'll get that to Josue to look at, because this is getting to the point where it's becoming more and more something that can be taken up by the staff team now that it's getting kind of, all the legal barriers took a lot of time. One of the things that, I want your input on the process. The process is described in this document, draft July 10th, 2019. But a bigger, more strategic decision has to do with a tiered pricing approach. And the question is this the direction that council wants to take? So if you'll scroll past the process to a memo from the credit union dated June 30th, 2019 to me from Sandy Hollenberg, I can explain what this means. So the credit union, when they make loans, and most banks, when they make loans, there are tiered interest rates depending on the level of risk, that you're taking on when you loan money. So the 3.9% is the loan rate that the credit union has to charge just to keep themselves whole on this program. They're not making any revenue, but the lowest possible interest that we can charge, and stay at zero to someone who is receives a revolving loan is 3.9%. So the way the credit union uses this is they look at somebody's sort of credit profile, and then they decide how much interest to charge based on the risk. Now, that makes good sense. That's like good business sense. But, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, and I feel like I have my back to you, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is the purpose of the revolving loan fund is to make monies available to entities who normally would not have they wouldn't qualify for just standard money maybe, or they're going to have to put it on a credit card, or, they're going to the whole idea is to make the money accessible without having high interest. So there may be times that we say, wow, this is really risky. we maybe want to increase the interest, or we may just always say, let's keep this interest as low as we can and just, charge no additional loan rate to the borrower. So I'm just wondering if you've had time to think about that, if you think we should take on a loan-by-loan determination of what that loan rate to the borrower should be, or if we want to just say, we're just going to maybe always just go with 1% and just charge 4.9% and never go up from there. It's kind of a philosophical thing, and I wondered what you all think.
So, obviously, I've been on the loop a little bit. Is the criteria still, or is that base criteria that a potential borrower has been refused?
No, we're
Okay.
not mandating that.
Okay. And so do we know what goes into the credit union's evaluation of the borrower's portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, they do the standard evaluation. So the kind of, now this, we start to drift into the process now, right? So the Economic Sustainability Commission is interested in doing the initial vetting of applications. Right now, actually, it was Karen who reminded me that when we were working on the incentive program, I had mocked up sort of a rubric that was intended to bounce incentive applications off of, the village values and the benefit to the community and that sort of thing. So the Economic Sustainability Commission can take the responsibility of tuning that up and bringing it to council to review. So the first process when an application comes in has nothing to do with financial risk at all. It is, and the commission wouldn't see that. They just see, the application and vet it against village goals and values. And then they kind of score it and make a determination that, yeah, this is strong or it's not. If they determine it's strong, then it goes to the credit union. The credit union does all of that financial analysis. That we do not see that. The Economic Sustainability Commission does not see that. The council does not see that. Then they prepare just a sheet where they give what, if they were going to be giving the loan, what tier they would assign it to. Now, that doesn't mean we have to charge interest at that tier, because we're for a different purpose than a credit union. So it's a consideration that we might have. The biggest concern is that, we really want to make a wise decision and fully informed, but we also want to, as much as possible, protect people's information too. So the credit union, on one hand, makes it very, very clear that they are not going to tell us whether we should make this loan or not. They are not going to make that decision for us. We have to make that decision based on the analysis that they do, and then we make the decision about the risk.
But would the credit union give us their
Tier?
their tier?
Yes.
So,
And that's it. So they,
That's a
I mean,
signal.
yeah.
right.
So they're basically doing like just a personal loan evaluation. So mostly
Yeah.
it's based on credit scores
Yeah.
and then checking a few other things.
And
so-
we also are asking for collateral. So if individuals or entities have collateral, people have vehicles or, the business has collateral against the loan, that gets factored in.
All right, well, I'll weigh in and then I'll step back. I would submit that we take what the credit union says, i.e. pick a tier. They'll say they propose tier 3. I would submit that we add some value by going up a tier or lowering the interest rate by one tier so that we provide value. Not necessarily making it 1 all the time or 2 all the time, but at least making the interest rate lower if there's room to do so, lower than what the credit union says, so that we provide some value. Because they could go get that same loan probably at that tier, somebody else, somewhere else. So the value that we provide is that we give them a lower interest rate by 1, 2, or more points.
I was going to say another thing, and I don't want to make it too complicated, but doing other proof of payment on time. So if they're working to build their credit, showing how they've made on-time payments through things that wouldn't necessarily be reflected in the credit score, like paying rent on time, getting a letter from their landlord, something like that, or the possibility of diminishing rates. So if, let's say that they were signed on at tier 4, but had the ability to drop a tier or two after paying on time for a certain period, having that diminishing rate, that could be a possibility.
So,
On the-
yes, and though, I think that really is all the business of the credit union.
Mhm.
Like, we are not in that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the good news. We
Mhm.
are making a decision about the alignment to village values and goals, and we have this money.
Yeah.
But that stuff that you're talking about there, that's not our business.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. They're great partners, though. You know, I think they're really trying to make it all work. Yeah.
I missed that. Sounded like you're asking us to have input onto what kind of rate.
Well,
they
the
would have,
question,
and now you're
it's
saying
more.
it's the credit union doing it.
No, what I mean is like the kinds of things that reducing interest over time, if they're
Yeah.
paying on time and stuff, we won't know that level of detail. But what I'm asking is this body interested in these tiered rates based on risk and credit? Or do we just want to say, there's going to be, this is the rate? I mean, because that's the other option. We can just say 4.9% or 3.9%. We can just pick one and stick with it, or we can go with this tiered line. I thought the tiered rates were interesting because they gave us flexibility.
Yeah, I mean, allowing the folks at the credit union to do their job, that means that there's a reason why they pick a tier. And we don't need to take on the extra risk of just throwing it out the door. And if they say it should be tier 5, I mean, if we're always giving everybody 1%, I think that's maybe a little more risky than what we ought to be in terms of being responsible. But there's a lot of advantage in moving from 5 down to 4, 3, or 2, and there's still value, I think, that we provide. And this may not be a solid answer to the question, but what can we do to provide value? Again, they could get a rate on the market somewhere, but they can come to us and get better. That's what I think we want to try to provide.
Right, and I think that's, just to clarify, like, the distinction is that we don't want to get involved in the financial piece. So that's why, some of those letters or diminishing rates or whatever would add an extra amount of, work that, I don't think we want to get involved in. So, Lisa's question about what's our philosophy behind this program, I like what you're saying, Kevin, for sure, that, the goal is we're not trying to, like, generate a lot of extra funds. We want to, like, help people and keep, the fund at least, even, so. Were you going to say something, Josue?
I have some, on the tiers are designed to include the risk profile. So if you take away the numbers, it's A, B, C, D, F paper. And there's a tendency of default rate within that, and that's part of the risk profile. So I think, Kevin, you made a point about being competitive. The tier 1 at 4.9, if that's A paper, people with that kind of credit score, they can get better than that in the outside market. So there isn't a whole lot of value in that tier 1. You can go online, Sophie or Lending Club, and you could get that if you got A paper. So, and I think that point is aligned with yours, Lisa, about ideologically what kind of value you want to create. Right. And if I heard you correctly, are these tiers good enough for us, or could we move folks to a less wide band instead of 5 tiers, 4 tiers? So could you group A and B into one, or move the Bs into As and create that shift? And I think that is, to me, when I hear you say that, is, could we take on more risk than what a typical financial institution would? And instead of saying our tier 1 is this A paper, it's at 4.5, let's say that our tier 1, the best one, it's really B, and let's move those 5.9 people to that 4.9. So you're really talking about discounting the rate even
Exactly.
further.
And that part of what someone makes an applicant a paper isn't only their credit score. It's also what they're trying to do, you know, because that's why we're doing this revolving loan fund. We're not a bank.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's exactly right.
Mhm.
So, why did I, you know, there's now, because of the Community Foundation, there's this jump transaction, right, where the money goes to the Community Foundation, to the credit union, and then the agreement on the CD is between the Community Foundation and the credit union, and our arrangement is with the Community Foundation. So we are now at the time when obviously you need to get very actively involved. I'm so grateful, and Colleen, and start to move this forward and look at these different agreements. So I guess the one other thing that I want to bring up, because I like the idea of reducing maybe to fewer tiers, and the devil's in the details, but we can bring that back to council. It sounds like everyone's okay with tiers of some sort. Yeah. So the other thing then has to do with a process point. So that is still a little bit uncertain. So the agency fund with the Community Foundation, I can use the term like a donor advised fund. So what that means is that, and there's lots of these funds with the Community Foundation where the entity that gives the money has control over where the money's given. So the Community Foundation trustees, they're made aware, but it's really the donor just calls and says, write a check for this much money to this entity. So we wouldn't be the first group working with the Community Foundation that's retaining control over who receives a revolving loan from the Village of Yellow Springs, even though the money's gone to the Community Foundation, right? So then the question is, who's going to make the final call? The Economic Sustainability Commission does the initial screening. Then it goes to the credit union, and that's where the financial stuff, that's private information, happens. But then at a certain point, we get a package back. That's the analysis by the Economic Sustainability and the financial rating from the credit union. So I am now at another shaded area with legal counsel, because I had understood that we could use executive session to make the final decision, which would help to protect the privacy of the applicant's financial information. But now, as of this evening, just hours before this meeting, Chris Kennard wants to look into that again. So if we can't use executive session to make a final determination, then that changes the process. If we make the final determination here, the downside is that the person's financial sheet becomes publicly available information. And we have had a conversation before, I think, at this desk about how, well, if you're going to apply for money to a municipality, you've got to know that some stuff is going to be public, and you've got to be okay with that if you're going to apply for the money. Another suggestion that was made is that the final package come back to the office of the village manager, and the decision is made there, not by council.
Or it could be finance committee or some minority of council with the village manager, or something other than the full council.
Right, so then like, at what point does that fold into our record keeping? I just don't know. This is where I'm, a relatively new person with all these rules and regulations. So who's gonna make the final decision is not quite as final as this process document makes it sound.
And maybe something, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but something to tack on to that in terms of the public piece is that business in the past was very public, and when people did not make payments or there were other issues, it was openly discussed in a public meeting, and that was...
That we will not That we will not. That's all on the credit union now, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
they're doing
that
all the
goes
collections.
back to-
Where
okay.
the
Great.
once the loan is given, the relationship is between the borrower and the credit union, just
Okay.
as any other loan would be. So we're out of it at that point.
I mean, we are able to say how aggressively we would want them to pursue that, but otherwise, yeah, they're handling all the
Yeah.
collections.
So then the question is just who's gonna make the final decision? And I think I just need input on that again.
Well, is there anywhere else along the process, if the finance committee is making the final decision, is there any other, are there enough recommendations somewhere along the way? I mean, I think I think the first thing that comes from the credit union is, yes, we would at this interest rate.
Right, so let's say, okay, it's not very much money, right? So let's say, what are we gonna do if we have three, three that are equal and it's gonna tap out the fund? I'm just trying to think ahead, it could become a difficult choice, there could be more than one, and you can't say yes to them all, and.
So maybe, the last I heard is that we could potentially use executive session for this, so, but
Yeah,
that still needs to be checked.
Yes.
So it sounds like we've got two thoughts on the table, so one is that, which you outlined, and the other is, put it to the finance committee or, constitute another two council members. Should we decide that once we, at the next meeting, once we
Yeah, I think until we
hear
hear
back from Chris?
back from Kennard on whether we can use executive session, because for me, the advantage of starting out in executive session is it gives us some experience and feel for the process, and then if we're comfortable with it, if we feel that we're getting the right information from the different stakeholders, from ESC, from the credit union, then we might say, okay, this is rolling, and we can get out. But at first, maybe we would all be involved if we can. Okay, thank you.
Sounds
I
good.
took up a lot of time there, but.
Well, we're
Thank
trying
you.
to finally nail this down.
Right.
And it's been a couple years in the making, but it'll be great. Megan?
Thank you. So I just want to understand what part of the process is going to be transparent and what's not, and maybe it's not determined yet. I think the public understands that people's personal financial information is not really something that they should have access to, but I would very much like to see council actually make the decisions in a public body and people knowing how much money is going to which entities. And I mean, if an entity doesn't pay it back, I mean, I think that's also some information that the public, so
Yeah.
just keeping, some important aspects transparent and open.
Yeah, so, my spirit in this is to have as much transparent as we can, but we do know that one piece of that, we're trying to protect as much of that
The
private
finance.
data that we can. But other than that, I think it needs to be entirely transparent.
Yeah, so the process from the Economic Sustainability Commission and their recommendation, that is a public document. The ultimate decisions about who gets what money and that we're recouping that will definitely be public as well.
The only reason to have that conversation initially in a executive session would be if we have access to financial data that we just don't want to have out there. And then the decision-making process would be then an agenda item. I imagine it's going to be a standing agenda item when we're.
Yeah, we can't make a decision in executive session, so we would still have to come out and talk about it in a public meeting. Great. Okay, quickly on our village goal session, because since it only happened on Friday, we don't have anything in the packet but we do have on the table a great summary from Judy.
Summary.
And I just want to highlight that one of the things that Mary Ann brought up that we recognized was the need to prioritize and kind of align that with what Josue is going to be focusing on for the next 5 months now. So we kind of flagged, as mentioned in this document, that affordability, infrastructure needs, smart planning, fiscal responsibility, and the village justice system are the 5 areas that we're going to really focus on. Within each of those areas, we have 3 to 5 tasks that we think are accomplishable in the next 5 months. And so a couple things that we'll be working on. I promise to compile that all into a document, so that will be available for the August 19th meeting for us to discuss more. Josue and I and the village team are going to also work on a timeline and how those things are going to be accomplished. And that'll also tie into, what Josue's goals are for the end, till the end of the year. So not much more to say at this point, but it'll be nice to see what actually is going to happen for the rest of the year. And interestingly enough, it does align with most of the actions that we committed to for 2019. There are a few things that we decided are no longer priorities, but overall, that's where we're going. Okay, new business, we already talked about under legislation, so Josue.
All right, we already covered residential solar. Want to cover event management. Our team provided municipal support for 2 signature events, the 4th and the Spring Fest. Both events were executed successfully with little to no incidents. I want to publicly recognize the leadership and teamwork of the departments, specifically the police department and public works, including parks and recreation. It speaks volumes to the leadership and teamwork, how well coordinated these events were. I'm really impressed with the magnitude and the little resources we have and how good of a job the team does. On events, we are reviewing our special events permitting process and the allocation of resources to ensure public safety during events. We are collaborating with MTFR on the process and internal changes and recommendations where necessary in the near future. On infrastructure, unidirectional flushing was successfully completed. Side note, Johnny has a collection of magnesium metal that came out of the pipe, so if you're interested in a historical rock from our pipes, you're welcome to, just don't light it on fire. It's magnesium.
Where can we pick these
Science
up?
projects.
We have it in Johnny's office. They're currently paperweight right now.
Manganese.
Yeah.
I'd like to see it.
Manganese, what did I say?
Magnesium.
Oh, manganese. All right, Vectrum, that's an ongoing project along Dayton up to the 300 block. Vectrum's also conducting video inspection of sewer lines along Xenia in preparation for horizontal boring. Sidewalks, there's sidewalk repairs. Phase 2 of sidewalk grinding begins July 17th along West South College, East Enon Row, North Winter, and North Walnut. I'm excited to announce that we have 2 new hires this month, a meter reader, Travis Holtelin, and a part-time dispatcher, Danielle Franklin, both Yellow Springs residents.
Great.
And finally, I will be out of the office July 26th through August 4th.
Going to Europe?
And yes, I will be in Europe. I have an additional request. This is outside of my report, primarily because of the timing of when this information came to light. As you know, we've had an ongoing conversation regarding EnviroFlight and how to keep the business in town. The business is considering 2 locations for relocation sites. One's in Kentucky and one's in North Carolina. Both localities have offered incentive packages ranging from $600,000 to $300,000. I think we're all in agreement with this, that we would like to keep EnviroFlight in Yellow Springs for various reasons. Many of their employees live in town. Their business products and values are aligned with those of Yellow Springs, and they include environmental friendly and sustainable business model. What I need from you is I request your permission to draft a letter of support for an incentive package that the state of Ohio, Greene County, and Yellow Springs will negotiate to retain EnviroFlight, retain them in Yellow Springs. Additionally, I would like to request an executive session to discuss the details of what an incentive package from Yellow Springs would include. Items that it could be included is the sale of land, which would be up to 5 acres, at the CBE, infrastructure work, which is common for municipalities to do, and we have done them in the past in Yellow Springs, such as building the infrastructure to deliver water, electricity, and sewer service to the site. Your permission here is to emphasize our support for keeping the business in Yellow Springs and to continue the conversation with EnviroFlight and its representatives. Anything that will be negotiated and offered to EnviroFlight as an official offer will come before council for approval. I think the executive session is important for us to have this discussion internally, preserve some of the discretion that we have in negotiating, and whatever gets finalized will come to you for final approval.
When?
When? Well,
Executive session.
the
When?
executive session, the sooner the better, so that we have a framework in which we're all clear on what we're operating in.
I mean,
And
are you meeting tonight?
no, not tonight.
Okay.
Not tonight. Tomorrow morning?
Nope.
No. No, sometime in the near future, so,
The earliest you could do it is Friday, because you need to get it in the paper.
So, I mean, and so my understanding is Josue is asking for two things, and we talked a little about this on Friday. One is this letter that shows our support to keep EnviroFlight here, as well as the precedents that we've had for incentives with no guarantees. And then secondly, the executive session, and I agree as soon as possible, would also be an opportunity to engage EnviroFlight leadership so that we can actually talk to them about why we want to keep them here and get a sense for what they're thinking about. But I will say that my understanding is the priority is having that letter, which Josue said on Friday he would share with us individually by email to make sure that we're okay with that, not committing us to anything that we haven't agreed to.
right. And some of the things that we've committed to in the past have been from fee waivers, the tap fee waivers that are at $750, and as high as spending $300,000 for infrastructure work on putting water and sewer lines at the cemetery projects and other sites. So those are the range of possibilities. We would stick within what has already been done in the past.
You mentioned the state of Ohio as well. Do we have any idea what kinds of things they might?
Yes, so currently the county is pitching in money and the state is pitching in money. So there's money coming from the Economic Development Office, that's around 100,000, and Ohio Jobs, 110,000. So we've got 210 on the table. And that's up to that amount from those entities. They're not guaranteed that they're getting that amount. They have to meet certain requirements and certain points on their application to be able to qualify for that entire amount. So we can take a similar approach to say, the realm of possibilities, these are all these things that are possible.
And we saw the county's letter, and it was, here's what is possible, but it was non-committal.
Correct. And they basically said, this is what our grants program is. We provide funding up to this amount based on what we know. You would have to formally apply for a grant, and you have to meet all those grant guidelines. And if you make it through there, we'll give you a grant contingent upon there being funding and final approval. So there are a few check points that they need to cross.
So I'm not clear, what are you asking for
So-
us right now?
Letter, approval to write a letter
Yes.
Yes.
of support. Okay,
Absolutely.
yes,
Thank you.
I agree too. And then I think when Josue shares that with us, he or Judy can figure out how we could get that executive session together. Okay?
And I would have liked to have brought this to you sooner. There's a lot of time, a lot of void left in the conversations, and then suddenly we heard that there's two offers on the table, and we're reacting to not want to be excluded or be left out of consideration just because we can't get this initial offer in.
And they've got a board meeting coming up.
Yes, and they have a.
That's the driver.
Yes.
Is that they have a board meeting where there is going to be a decision made.
Right.
Well, a decision.
Do you know what the date of the board meeting is?
It's in August, but I don't know exactly the date. Yeah, and again, just to reemphasize, we did not get the details until Friday morning. So that's why, I think normally it's within our purview to have an executive session about negotiating and that sort of thing. But we've been forced to scramble a bit, so.
It's important.
Yes.
And if they're gone, then they're gone. But if we invest and they don't leave, then we'll have that revenue stream from retaining them in the community, not to mention the people who work, so I think it's important that I know that some people don't like it, but I'm like, we have to be bold, but
No.
it's a great opportunity.
No, and to put that into context, EnviroFlight would have a payroll of around $1 million. That represents to us around $19,000 in income tax on that payroll. On just running preliminary numbers, should the property to be developed be worth $4 million, and currently their project is a $5 million project. On a $4 million appraised value, we're looking at $109,000 in property taxes. That will be divided between the township, the county, Yellow Spring School, the village, and the health district. So that's $109,000 in 1 year, plus the 18, the income tax. That's close to $130,000 in just 1 year. And any company that's gonna make it a $4 million, $5 million investment, that's not a 1 year investment. That's at minimum 5 years. They will actually be signing on a 10-year lease. So that's 10 years that we can keep this business in town. So I think from a revenue perspective, what do they represent now and what they represent in the future is revenue positive. In addition to all the social benefits that we
Right.
get of having such a unique business like EnviroFlight in town.
Exactly, thank you.
All right, sounds good. Move forward. Judy, anything?
Just to make note that Planning Commission, beginning in September, will meet on the second Tuesday of each month rather than the second Monday of each month, and that I will be out of the office between July 19th and August 6th.
Have fun. Okay, anything anyone wants to highlight on boards and commissions?
Yes. I want to highlight the request that Sue Pfeiffer has made to investigate costs of doing a pilot recycling project that would involve Logan County. And at this point, all she is asking is that council approve reaching out, and we would be doing this with Josue to get some prices on what it would cost to do a pilot project.
Yep, I think it sounds awesome. And then I guess making sure that we know how much we are paying Rumpke for recycling. Because if I understand correctly, this could be a complete, transition for our recycling needs.
Well, yes, I mean, what it could be, I mean, this is a step-by-step
Right.
process to look at.
It looks great.
Okay, thank you.
So everyone else is good?
Yeah, I have some highlights.
I meant with
Okay, with
this.
that, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, Lisa.
So, Art and Culture Commission, we were briefly short of quorum, but we are roaring back with action, and are happy to announce that we've determined to grant a VITA Award to the New Hortz and Whitehall Farm for their contribution of the sunflower field.
That's a great idea.
And I'm really excited about that. The date for unveiling the award is TBD, but we're hoping it'll be in the middle of August. We have to figure out with the New Hearts where to put it and how to make it safe and all of that sort of thing, but we want to get it there before the photo
I was going to
season.
say, what a great photo op, huh?
Yeah. The other thing is I need to acknowledge Chief Carlson as a honorary member of the Art and Culture Commission for now and forever because of the work that he's coordinated with Ms. Chappelle to do a major installation of art for the lobby. And there's a little clip of it, picture of it. It's very big, 4x4, these big panels. And I don't want to have too much time. Would you like to just say a little bit about what that process has been like for you?
Absolutely. I'm real excited. So I was led to local artists, Samaya Chappelle. She's 17, be a senior at Yellow Springs High School this year. We collaborated with Samaya to create kind of a merge of some culture from Yellow Springs nationally. She created a silhouette of Coretta Scott King. The only restrictions that we put on her were the colors used, and that somewhere within the art piece, there was some reference to police work. So she has created something that we're very excited to reveal. I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but it's in the near future. And it'll be on the main wall downstairs when you enter the building.
Awesome.
So the Art and Culture Commission will collaborate to help plan a celebration. And then the other thing that we've talked about is that, this piece, Ms. Chappelle could decide to either donate it to the permanent collection or take it back, and that we would perhaps annually have this become a space for emerging artists with art that furthers this joint mission of the arts related to social justice.
Absolutely.
So Brian, thank you so much for really leading us to creating an emerging artist space in the Bryan Center.
Thank you for the support.
Thank you, Brian.
All right.
Thanks.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. Kanetta, did you want to say anything, or?
Yep, I'll just be very brief.
Okay.
So over the last several weeks, we interviewed past members of the Justice System Task Force, and generally we were kind of looking at what the perceived goal of the task force was, where they found success, where there were barriers, and overall we had pretty general consensus that the task force was successful and accomplished a lot in its 2 years. There was also consensus that one of the strategies that really worked was creating subcommittees that included non-members to increase capacity and to break up the work and let the task force members play to their strengths as well as their interests. And then another major thing that was expressed is the need to narrow the agenda. People felt like they were rushed and that they had so much on their plate that they felt they had to accomplish in those 2 years that it was stressful. So kind of narrowing that focus and then having a more formal process. And we think that bringing it to a commission versus a task force will bring that formal process to the Justice System Commission. So as we move forward, there are a couple of things that we had in mind. That one, we really need to have the time to thoroughly read and digest the assessment from Wasserman and Haas. The other thing is to get the support from council on the initial goals, those narrowly focused goals of the commission as we move forward. So I have a timeline in there. It's just pushed back a couple of weeks with the assessment, the anticipation of the assessment. So we're hoping that we interview and select the commission members by the end of August and then start it up in September.
Looks great. And the only thing I would encourage is looking at the reports from Judith, which I also contributed to, just, kind of reflecting on those through the lens of what you guys have learned, but great process. Okay. Future agenda items. So I know the thing about the deer issue was brought up. To me, that is a staff thing that should come through your manager's report. Anything else?
I have two things. I'm very hopeful that we will have at our next meeting the police assessment.
Right.
And if we don't have it, at least we should definitely have when we will have it. And I also want to have a discussion at council about what would be involved and looking at the pros and cons of doing a opt-out for utility roundup.
Okay.
Did you want a village goal update?
Yes. And we'll have documents for that. Kevin, did you have something?
I was going to mention the opt-out, and certainly just beginning the discussion, but we need to really make sure that we've let all current efforts run to ground. But that's part of the discussion.
Yep. Anything else?
Solar ordinance?
Yep.
So I'm meeting with Sharon, Dr. Sherlock, about the health assessment this week to get a status, but I think in terms of the amount of critical business, if you want to push the health assessment to September 3rd, I would be okay with that.
Okay.
Cool. And we may depending on how tight the poll ordinance, rate ordinance is, we may push that forward too. And I realize the meeting went a little bit long. We are skipping a meeting, so I think it was important that we took care of some of this business. And I think this is the first time this year that we went over 3 hours, so.
That was good. You just
Yes.
made me feel good about going long.
We used to have 4-hour meetings was the average, so, anyway, thank you, everyone. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right, have great breaks.
Thanks. So now's the time I should go to Europe.
So Josue, could I
I said, now's the time I should have gone to Europe.
I'm back here.
But we went to someone's wedding, so I had to-
Did you actually get to the wedding? So,
Yeah, yeah.
and we have
We can pair.